Ryan's phone hit the table so hard the water glass shook. 2 hours. 2 hours he had sat in this restaurant in a borrowed jacket and his daughter's chosen tie, watching the door, watching his phone, watching the candle burn down, and Dana Prescott had not walked through that door, had not sent a single word, had not given him even the small mercy of an excuse. The waiter stopped coming by. The couple at the next table stopped pretending not to look. And Ryan Carter, who had not cried in public since the day they put his wife in the ground, felt his jaw lock so tight his back teeth ached because he was 35 years old, and he was sitting alone at a table set for two with a glass of water in front of an empty chair. And the worst part, the part he couldn't outrun, was that some hollow, exhausted piece of him had known it would end like this. He had almost made it to his feet, jacket half off. Dignity, almost intact, when a woman he had never seen before pulled out the empty chair across from him and sat down. No apology. No hesitation. Like she had a reservation. She looked directly at him and said, "You've been sitting here long enough. Can I be your second chance tonight?" Ryan had no idea. He was looking at the woman who was about to tear his entire life open and rebuild it into something he'd stopped believing he deserved. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and hit the bell. You will not want to miss what comes next. The tie was Emma's idea. That was the first thing Ryan thought about when he finally sat down at table 9. The corner table with the small white candle and the two menus standing up like little paper soldiers. Because Emma had spent 40 minutes going through every tie he owned before settling on the navy blue one with the tiny gold diamonds. That one, Daddy. That one makes you look like someone important. He'd laughed at that. Actually laughed, which was something he hadn't done easily in a long time. He'd bent down and let her tighten the knot herself, her little 8-year-old fingers fumbling with the fabric, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth, the way it always did when she was concentrating. "You look handsome again," she'd said, stepping back to study him with those serious brown eyes that looked exactly like her mother's. Again. That word had sat in his chest the whole drive over. Again meant she remembered a version of him from before. A version that smiled more. A version that hadn't spent the last 4 years running on coffee and guilt, and the quiet grinding fear that he was failing the only person in the world who still needed him completely. He'd checked the time on his phone one more time before walking into Callahan's Steakhouse. 7:02 p.m. I was 2 minutes early. Her name was Dana. Dana Prescott. 33, divorced once, no kids, worked in marketing. His sister Karen had set it up after months, maybe closer to a year, of what she called gentle encouragement, and what Ryan called relentless, exhausting pressure. "You can't just disappear into dad mode forever, Ryan," Karen had told him over the phone 3 weeks ago, using the voice she saved for conversations she considered serious. "Sarah's been gone 4 years. 4 years. You're allowed to live again." "I am living." "You're surviving. That's different." He hadn't had an answer for that. The hostess, a young woman with a high ponytail and a tablet, had smiled at him when he came in and walked him to table 9 without being asked. He figured Karen had called ahead. Karen called ahead about everything. He sat. He straightened the tie Emma had chosen. He ordered water and said yes when the waiter asked if he was waiting for someone, and he said it with the kind of easy confidence he used to have. The confidence that belonged to a man who hadn't spent the last 4 years being slowly worn down by grief and single parenthood, and the particular exhaustion that comes from being everything to someone small. 7:15 p.m. He checked his phone. No messages from Dana. He told himself that was fine. People ran late. Traffic was bad on a Friday. She probably just... His phone buzzed. His heart did something embarrassing. It was Karen. "How's it going?" "Details." He typed back. "She's not here yet." 3 dots appeared. Then, "She'll be there. Stop catastrophizing. You look great in that jacket, BTW. I saw your reflection when you left the house." He set the phone face down on the table. 7:30 p.m. The waiter. A kid couldn't have been more than 22, with the kind of easy smile that belonged to someone who hadn't yet learned what real exhaustion felt like, came back and asked if he was ready to order. "Just a few more minutes," Ryan said. "Of course, take your time." He watched the kid walk away and thought about how strange it was sitting in a restaurant this nice on a Friday night. Not strange bad exactly, just unfamiliar. The way a pair of shoes you haven't worn in years feels unfamiliar. Like your feet remember the shape, but the fit still surprises you. He and Sarah used to come to places like this. Not Callahan's specifically, but places with white tablecloths and candles and menus that didn't have pictures. Early in their marriage before Emma, when they were still figuring out who they were together, they used to dress up on Friday nights for no reason. Just because they could. Just because being young and in love and alive felt like something worth celebrating. He hadn't been back to a restaurant like this since the funeral. His sister had booked this particular one. He suspected she thought the occasion required a certain level of seriousness. That, or she was trying to impress a woman neither of them had met. 7:47 p.m. He picked up his phone. Still nothing from Dana. He thought about texting her. Decided against it. Thought about it again. Decided against it again more firmly this time, and put the phone in his jacket pocket. The couple at the table nearest to him, both probably mid-50s, comfortable together in the way that only came from decades of shared mornings, glanced over at him. The woman looked away quickly. The man gave him that small, careful nod that men gave each other when they recognized something in a face they didn't want to name out loud. Ryan looked back down at the white tablecloth. The candle flickered. 8:03 p.m. The waiter came back. Different approach. This time slower, more careful, the way you approached something that might startle. Can I get you anything while you wait? Bread may be an appetizer. Just water's fine. Of course. He didn't say of course the same way he had at 7:30. At 7:30 it had sounded light, breezy, professional. Now it had something softer in it, something almost careful. Ryan noticed, and he wished he hadn't, because noticing meant he couldn't pretend he wasn't being noticed. 8:15 p.m. He knew. He'd known for probably 30 minutes if he was being completely honest with himself, which he was very rarely in the habit of being. He sat with it for a few more minutes. Anyway, that hollow, airless knowledge, because knowing and admitting were two different things, and he wasn't quite ready to make that step. He thought about Emma. She was at Karen's for the night, which was a whole production in itself. Emma had packed her overnight bag with the careful seriousness of someone preparing for a 3-week expedition, and had made Karen promise 6 separate times that they would watch the movie Emma wanted, and not the movie Aunt Karen wanted. And Karen had agreed to all 6 promises with a patience Ryan was genuinely grateful for. I thought about how Emma had stood in the doorway when he was leaving, watching him with those big brown eyes, and said, "Daddy, what if she's really nice?" "Then I'll tell you all about it tomorrow." "What if she's not nice?" "Then I'll tell you about that too." "What if she's mean to you?" He'd stopped then and crouched down to her level. "Then I'll come home early, and we can both eat ice cream and watch whatever you want, okay?" She'd thought about this with extreme seriousness. "Deal," she'd said, and held out her hand, and he'd shaken it, and she'd laughed. He was going to have to tell her tomorrow that it was an ice cream night. He pulled out his phone. Still nothing from Dana. He opened his texts and typed, "Hey, just checking in, still at Callahan's if you're on your way." He stared at it for a long moment. Then he deleted it. Because he already knew. He already knew, and sending that message would just be asking the universe to confirm something he wasn't ready to hear. Confirmed. It would be the digital equivalent of tipping over the water glass himself, forcing a spill that was going to happen anyway, just to get it over with. He put the phone away. 8:27 p.m. He picked up the menu. Not because he was going to order. He wasn't. He wasn't going to sit here and eat a $40 steak alone at a corner table while the candle burned down and the waiter found increasingly creative ways to avoid making direct eye contact with him. He wasn't going to do that to himself. But he needed something to look at, something that wasn't the empty chair across from him, or the untouched menu sitting in front of it, or the second glass of water that the waiter had brought automatically, and that had been sitting there full and cold and completely pointless for the last hour and a half. He stared at the menu without reading it. He thought about his daughter's face. He thought about the word again. I thought about his wife, Sarah, who had died on a Tuesday morning in October 4 years ago from an aneurysm that nobody had known was coming, that the doctor said later had been there for years, growing quietly, saying nothing, until one morning it wasn't quiet anymore, and about how the restaurant he and Sarah used to go to for their Friday nights had closed during the pandemic, and he'd driven past the empty building once about 8 months after she died and had to pull over because he couldn't see the road. I thought about how he'd told Karen 3 weeks ago I am living, and how completely humiliatingly untrue that had been. He thought about how tired he was, not tired like needing sleep, though he needed sleep. Had needed sleep for probably 4 years straight, but tired the way a structure gets tired. The way a building gets tired when it's been holding the same weight for too long, and the materials start to say quietly in the language of small cracks, and settling this cannot go on indefinitely. 8:31 p.m. He set the menu down. He was going to leave. He'd decided. He would flag down the waiter, the kind young kid who had given up pretending everything was normal, and he would pay for the water and the bread he hadn't touched, and the 2 seats he hadn't needed, and he would walk out into the November air and call Karen on the drive home, and tell her that it was fine that these things happened, that he appreciated her trying. He was reaching for his jacket when someone sat down across from him. Not hesitantly, not apologetically, like she had a reservation. She set a glass of wine on the table, her own. She'd carried it from the bar, and she folded her hands in front of her, and she looked at Ryan with a directness that was so complete, so entirely unself-conscious, that it took him a full 3 seconds to process what was happening. She was wearing a charcoal suit, not a blazer and jeans kind of suit, an actual suit, structured and precise, and her dark hair was pulled back in a way that looked both completely effortless and like it had required considerable effort. She was probably 32, maybe 34. She looked like someone who ran things. Not in a way that was performed. She wasn't performing anything. She just looked like someone for whom competence was so deeply habitual, it had become physical. Like it lived in the way she held her shoulders. She looked at Ryan like she was reading something. "You've been sitting here long enough," she said. "Can I be your second chance tonight?" Ryan stared at her. He was aware distantly that his mouth was open slightly, and he closed it. "I'm sorry. I've been at the bar for 40 minutes, she said, and she was utterly calm about it, the way someone was calm when they'd thought something through carefully and were confident in the decision. "I watched you check your phone about 11 times. I watched the waiter give you the mercy of strangers face twice. I watched you pick up the menu and not read a single word of it. You were watching me. I was sitting at the bar. You were hard to miss." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not. "I'm Ryan," he said finally, because that seemed like the next thing to say, even if he wasn't sure why he was saying it to a stranger who had just sat down at his table uninvited and was now looking at him like she was waiting to see what he did with the information she'd just handed him. "Claire," she said. She didn't offer her last name. She didn't offer a handshake either. She just looked at him, and there was something in that look, not pity. He was almost sure it wasn't pity that he couldn't entirely name. "I didn't get stood up," he said. "Okay." She might just be Ryan. She said his name like she'd been saying it for years. Quiet, but precise. "It's 8:32. You've been here for an hour and a half." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Yeah," he said. "Okay, yeah." She picked up her wine glass and held it for a moment without drinking. "Do you want to stay? Here. At this restaurant. With me. I'm not asking for anything," she added. And there was something in her voice that made it absolutely clear she meant it, not as a disclaimer, not as a setup, just as information. "I came here tonight because I needed to not be at a business dinner, and I ended up at the bar, and now I'm sitting here. That's all." He studied her face, looking for the angle, looking for whatever the catch was. She let him look. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why are you sitting here? Why are you—" "I don't know you. You don't know me. There are other tables." She was quiet for a moment. "Because you looked," she said, "like someone who deserved to not sit alone tonight." The honesty of it landed on him like something physical. He sat with it for a moment. Then he said, "I'm a single dad. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I work 50-hour weeks doing logistics coordination for a distribution company, which sounds more interesting than it is. I borrowed this jacket from my neighbor Because I don't own one that's nice enough for this place. I haven't been on a date in 4 years, and apparently I can't even manage to do it successfully now. He wasn't sure why he said all of that. Maybe because she'd been honest with him, and it felt wrong to receive honesty without giving some back. Maybe because he was tired of presenting a version of himself that was tidied up and acceptable. She listened to all of it without any expression that indicated alarm or retreat. I run a company, she said. About 400 employees. I worked 20 years to get there, and I built most of it myself. I came to this restaurant tonight because I had a business dinner 3 blocks from here, and the man at the head of the table twice my age, half my intelligence, spent 45 minutes explaining my own company's financials to me in the tone of voice men use when they're talking to someone they think got lucky. She paused. I left in the middle of the appetizers. Yeah. He almost smiled. So we're both having a night, he said. We're both having a night. Something shifted. He couldn't have said exactly what or how, just that it did. The thing that had been sitting on his chest all evening, that hollow weighted thing, moved slightly. Not gone, but shifted. This restaurant, he said, is not where I would normally eat. Me either, she said. Someone else made the reservation. Where would you normally eat? She thought about it. Honestly, I have this diner I go to when I've had a terrible day. It's on Mercer Street, you probably don't know it. Tiny place. The coffee is just barely acceptable, and they play the same Johnny Cash record on repeat, and the pie is extraordinary. I know that diner, he said. She looked at him. Mercer Street Diner, he said. The one with the red counter stools and the sign in the window that says, since 1962, and means it. Yes, she said slowly. That's the one. Emma, my daughter, she calls it the Pie Diner. She thinks it's the best place in the city. She'd be heartbroken if she found out anyone else knew about it. For the first time, Claire smiled. It changed her face completely. I've been going there for 6 years, she said. I've never seen you there. I usually go on Sunday mornings, early. I go on bad days, which are apparently not on Sunday mornings. Lucky you, he said. Sunday mornings are brutal. She laughed. Actually laughed, not the polished professional social laugh he'd been expecting from someone who looked the way she looked, but a real one. A surprised one, like he'd caught her off guard, and she hadn't had time to put the professional version on. He felt something strange in his chest. Not grief, not the hollow thing. Something else. Do you want to go there? She asked. To the Pie Diner. You said you borrowed that jacket. The Pie Diner doesn't require a jacket. He looked at her. We just met. I know. You just sat down at my table without asking. I know that too. And now you want to go to a diner. The pie is extraordinary, she said. You said so yourself. He sat with it. The candle flickered. Across the room, the couple in their 50s were still there, still comfortable in the way of people who had made decades of small choices to stay. The waiter was at this bar, pointedly not looking in Ryan's direction. The second glass of water, the pointless one. The one for nobody, sat there in the candlelight, still full, still cold. Ryan picked up his jacket. I need to text my sister, he said. She's going to ask what happened. What are you going to tell her? He thought about Emma. Her little hand tightening the knot on the navy blue tie. That one makes you look like someone important. I'll tell her the evening took an unexpected turn, he said. He stood. Claire stood. And when they walked out of Callahan's Steakhouse together, Ryan in his borrowed jacket and Emma's chosen tie, Claire in her charcoal suit, neither of them looked back at table 9. But Ryan for just a second thought of the untouched glass of water still sitting in the candlelight. Still waiting for someone. The way he had been. The November air hit them both on the sidewalk, sharp and clean, and Claire turned her collar up, and Ryan shoved his hands in his pockets, because he'd forgotten gloves again. He always forgot gloves. It was a character flaw. Emma regularly criticized, and they stood there for a second, in the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable. 4 blocks, Claire said. I know where it is, Ryan said. Right, you do. They walked. I wasn't thinking about Dana Prescott anymore. He'd be honest about that later, much later to himself in the kind of private accounting that happened somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m., when the apartment was quiet, and Emma was asleep, and the day was over, and he'd be a little embarrassed by it, the speed with which the evening had pivoted. But walking down that sidewalk on that November night, hands in his pockets beside a stranger, who wasn't a stranger anymore, in some way he couldn't articulate. He wasn't thinking about the woman who hadn't come. I was thinking about the fact that he was walking, moving forward, which was, he understood somewhere below thought something he hadn't really done in a very long time. The Mercer Street Diner was exactly what it always was. Small, warm lit with the kind of light that forgave everything. The bell above the door rang when they pushed in. A woman behind the counter with gray-streaked hair and the expression of someone who had seen absolutely everything looked up, clocked them both in a single glance and pointed to a booth in the back. Two, Ryan said. They sat. The menus were laminated and sticky at the edges and listed 14 kinds of pie. Johnny Cash was playing from somewhere in the back, low and steady. "See?" Claire said, picking up this menu. "Extraordinary." "Emma's going to say you copied her," Ryan said. "Emma has good taste. She really does." He paused. "She's going to ask me 1,000 questions tomorrow morning. She's 8, but she cross-examines people like she went to law school." "What kind of questions? Was she nice? What did she look like? Did you make her laugh? Did she make you laugh? Did she know about dinosaurs? Because that's a non-negotiable for Emma. If you don't know about dinosaurs, you're automatically disqualified." Claire set the menu down. "Cretaceous or Jurassic?" she said. He stared at her. "In terms of the most interesting period for dinosaur development," she said, completely straight-faced. "Because Emma's going to ask." Do you actually?" "My father was a paleontologist," she said. "Retired now. I grew up with an entire wall of books about the Mesozoic era." "You're going to terrify her in the best possible way," he said. "I hope so." The waitress came. They ordered coffee. Ryan ordered the apple pie. Claire ordered the peach. The coffee arrived fast and hot, and genuinely just barely acceptable, exactly as advertised. Ryan wrapped both hands around the mug. I thought about the last time he'd sat in a diner with someone who wasn't Emma or Karen or one of Emma's friends' parents, making polite, exhausted conversation at a birthday party. He couldn't remember. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead." "At the restaurant, when you sat down." He paused, trying to find the precise question. "You said I looked like someone who deserved to not sit alone. What did that mean? What did you actually see?" She was quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable quiet, thinking quiet. The kind of quiet that came before an honest answer. "I saw a man," she said finally, "who was trying very hard, and had been trying very hard for a very long time, and who had done something that cost him something to do. Gotten dressed up, gone somewhere unfamiliar, made himself available to be hurt, and was sitting with the consequence of that with more dignity than most people would manage." He didn't say anything, and, she said, "You were wearing a tie that didn't quite match the jacket, and the way you kept touching it just once quickly with 2 fingers, it looked like someone had tied it for you." He looked down at the navy blue tie with the tiny gold diamonds. "Emma," he said. "Yeah," she said. "I figured." The pie arrived. Outside the window. November continued doing what November does in this city. Cold, relentless, stripping the last color out of everything, until what remained was just the bare, honest structure underneath. Ryan took a bite of apple pie. It was extraordinary. He looked at the woman across from him. This stranger, this unexpected person who had watched him from a bar for 40 minutes, and then walked across a restaurant and sat down like she had somewhere to be, and had decided it was there, and he thought about what Karen had said. "You're surviving. That's different." "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. He hadn't planned to say it, but there it was. Claire looked at him steadily. "I'm sorry," she said. "Just that. No fill. No over-explanation. Just I'm sorry, which was the right amount." "Emma was 4, he said. "She remembers her, pieces of her, the smell of her shampoo, the way she used to sing in the kitchen. But 4 years old is the memories are starting to get soft at the edges. I can see it. And I don't know if that's better or worse. I hadn't said that to anyone. He'd thought it at 3 a.m. in the particular silence of a sleeping apartment. But he hadn't said it. Tonight was, he said, the first time I've tried. In 4 years. My sister set it up. And the woman didn't come. And I sat there for an hour and a half, and I was ready to go home and tell Emma it was an ice cream night, and then you... He stopped. Then I sat down, Claire said. Then you sat down. Was that okay? He thought about it seriously. Yeah, he said. It was more than okay. She nodded. My turn, she said. Full disclosure. Okay. I built my company from nothing. I mean genuinely from nothing. I started it in a one-bedroom apartment with my own savings and one person who believed in me. It took 12 years to get to where it is now, 400 employees. Revenue. I would not have believed possible when I started. She paused. And I have eaten dinner alone in more hotel restaurants in more cities than I can count. And the business dinner tonight was the third one this month where a man who works for me explained my own work to me, like I'd only read about it in a magazine. And I'm tired, Ryan. I'm just tired in a way that the work doesn't fix anymore. I understood that, completely. The specific exhaustion of carrying something for a long time that should have gotten lighter by now, but hadn't. What fixes it? He asked. She looked at the pie for a second. Honestly, this diner. This specific coffee which is terrible. This record. She tilted her head slightly toward the kitchen where Johnny Cash was still playing low and steady, something about the Ring of Fire. And conversations where nobody's trying to get anything. Are you sure you're not trying to get anything? She met his eyes. Are you? He thought about it honestly. No, he said. I really don't think I am. Then we're the same. The coffee went cold while they talked. They ordered more. Ryan told her about Emma's most recent obsession, which was marine biology, and about the 2-week period when every conversation at home had somehow circled back to the mating habits of the anglerfish, which was factually extraordinary, and also slightly too much for a Tuesday morning over cereal. Claire told him about the moment she'd first realized her company was going to survive. Actually survive. And how she'd sat in her car in a parking garage at midnight and cried for 20 minutes. Not from happiness exactly, just from the release of a tension she'd been holding for so long, it had become structural. He told her about the time Emma had gotten lost in a grocery store for 7 minutes, and how those 7 minutes had rearranged something in him permanently. She told him about her father, the paleontologist, the quiet man who had driven her to her first business meeting in his 12-year-old Volvo, and had said getting out of the car, "Call me when it's done, I'll wait here." She'd told him not to wait. He'd waited anyway. 4 hours. That's a good father, Ryan said. The best, she said. And the way she said it told him that the past tense was intentional, and he didn't ask. The diner got quieter around them. The counterwoman came by twice to refill their coffee, and both times gave them the look of someone who had seen many things and judged very few of them. At some point, the Johnny Cash record ended and started again from the beginning, and neither of them mentioned it. It's late, Claire said eventually. Yeah. I have an 8 a.m. call. I have to be at Karen's by 7 to get Emma. Neither of them moved. This was, Ryan said, and he stopped because he wasn't sure what the end of that sentence was. Good seemed insufficient. Unexpected was accurate, but not enough. Necessary was the truest word he had, and it also felt like too much to say to someone he'd met 3 hours ago over cold coffee and extraordinary pie. Yeah, Claire said. It was. She understood what he hadn't finished. He could tell. He left cash on the table. He insisted she let him, which he appreciated, and they walked out into the November night, and the bell above the door rang again on the way out, and they stood on the sidewalk in the cold. And he thought about his daughter's 8-year-old hands tightening the knot on a navy blue tie and saying, "You look handsome again," and meaning it completely. Emma's going to want a full report, he said. Tell her peach pie beats apple, Claire said. That's going to start a war. Tell her I know things about the Cretaceous period that will blow her mind. That's going to start a different kind of war. She smiled. Not the polished version, not the professional version. The real one. The surprised one. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah. I'm glad you were at that restaurant tonight." He stood in the November cold in a borrowed jacket with his daughter's tie and thought about all the things that had to go exactly wrong to get him to this sidewalk at this particular moment. Dana not showing up. Karen pushing for a year the specific table in the corner. The waiter's mercy of strangers face 40 minutes at a bar, and he thought that maybe that was a strange thing to be grateful for. And then he thought maybe not. "Me too," he said. She walked one direction. He walked another. And Ryan Carter, 35 years old, single father, borrowed jacket. Emma's tie walked home through the November night with something in his chest that hadn't been there for 4 years. Not love. Not yet. Not certainty. Something earlier than that. Something that felt for the first time in a very long time like the beginning of something instead of the end. The next morning came the way mornings always did in Ryan's apartment, loud, immediate, and without mercy. Emma hit the kitchen at 7:14, still in her pajamas with the little stars on them hair going in 4 directions, and she climbed up onto the counter stool across from Ryan with the focused intensity of a prosecutor who had been preparing her case all night. "Tell me everything." Ryan handed her a glass of orange juice. "Good morning to you too." "Did she come?" He poured his coffee. He'd been home by midnight, picked Emma up from Karen's at 7 on the dot, and he had spent the 12-minute drive home deciding exactly how much of last night he was going to share with an 8-year-old who missed nothing and forgot nothing, and would absolutely use whatever information he gave her as ammunition for the next 6 months. "No," he said. "She didn't come." Emma's face did something complicated. The way it always did when she was calculating whether to be angry on his behalf or sad or both simultaneously. "That's really rude, Daddy. People get busy." She could have texted. "Yeah." "Did she text after?" "No." Emma was quiet for a moment. She drank her orange juice. She was thinking Ryan could always tell when Emma was thinking, because her left foot started swinging under the counter stool like a small, restless pendulum. "So it was just you the whole time." "Not the whole time," he said. The foot stopped swinging. "What does that mean?" He sat down across from her with his coffee. Someone else sat down. A different person. Emma's eyes got very wide. "A stranger sat at your table." "Yes." "That's weird." It was a little weird. "Was it a man or a woman?" "A woman." Emma put both elbows on the counter and leaned forward. "Was she nice?" Ryan thought about Claire looking at him across the table and saying, "You looked like someone who deserved to not sit alone tonight," with the specific honesty of someone who had decided to stop performing and meant every word. "Yeah," he said. "She was nice." "Did she make you laugh?" "A couple times." "What's her name?" "Claire." Emma tested the name silently, moving her lips around it. "Does she know about dinosaurs?" He looked at his daughter over his coffee mug. "Her father was a paleontologist." Emma's mouth dropped open, genuinely open, like he'd just told her someone had walked on the moon in their backyard. "You're joking." "I'm not joking." "Daddy." She grabbed the edge of the counter with both hands. "Daddy, that's the most important thing you've ever told me. More important than the time I told you we were getting a dog. We never got the dog." "Fair." She slid off the counter stool, grabbed her juice, and stood there with the look on her face that meant she was restructuring a significant amount of information. "Are you going to see her again?" "I don't know, Em." "You should see her again." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because she runs a company with 400 employees, and I coordinate distribution schedules and borrow jackets from my neighbor, and the distance between those two facts is not small," he thought. "Because last night felt real in a way that good things sometimes feel before you get close enough to see all the reasons they can't work. Because I'm still not entirely sure I know how to be someone who gets to want things again." "It's just not," he said. "Eat your breakfast." Emma gave him the look, the one that said she was filing this conversation away for later, and that later was not going to be far off, and she went to get her cereal, and Ryan sat at the kitchen counter in the morning quiet and thought about a woman in a charcoal suit who knew the difference between the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods and went to a diner on Mercer Street on her bad days. His phone was face down on the counter. He left it there. I was almost convinced he'd imagined the whole thing by the time it buzzed. He picked it up. A number he didn't recognize. No name. Just a text that said peach still beats apple. See. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Emma across the kitchen, who was reading the back of the cereal box with full concentration, the way she did every single morning, as if the nutritional information might have changed overnight. He typed back, "Emma says you're wrong and requests a formal debate." 3 dots. Then tell Emma I accept. She should bring her best Cretaceous arguments. He set the phone down. He was smiling. He hadn't noticed himself start to smile, which was how he knew it was real. Emma looked up from the cereal box. She studied his face with those lawyer's eyes. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said, and looked back down at the cereal box, and she was smiling too. He didn't call Karen for 3 days. He knew she'd been waiting. Karen was many things, and patient was not one of them at full strength, but he needed to sit with the previous Friday night by himself for a little while before he handed it over to someone else's interpretation. Because Karen was going to have interpretations. Karen always had interpretations. When he finally called on a Tuesday evening, while Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, he stepped out onto the small back porch and gave her the broad version. Dana didn't show. A woman named Claire sat down at his table. They went to a diner. They talked for 3 hours. Silence from Karen's end. Then, a woman just sat down at your table. Yes. A stranger. Yes. And you just went with it. We went to Mercer Street Diner. More silence. He could hear Karen processing, which had a specific sound, a kind of controlled breathing that meant she was reordering several things at once. Ryan. I know. What do you know? I know what face you're making right now. I'm not making a face. You're making the face where you're trying very hard to be calm, so you don't scare me off from whatever this is. She exhaled. Is it something, whatever this is? He leaned against the porch railing. The night was cold, but not as bad as Friday had been. We've texted a few times since then. Nothing, I mean nothing big, just back and forth. What kind of back and forth? Normal. Emma's dinosaur debate challenge. She sent me an article about anglerfish at 7 in the morning with no explanation. She sent you an article about anglerfish. Emma mentioned them at some point in my recap. Claire apparently took that seriously. Another pause. Okay, Karen said slowly. Who is she? What does she do? This was the part he'd been turning over for 3 days. Not because he was ashamed of it, he wasn't, but because he knew with the particular clarity of a man who had been paying close attention to the world for 35 years, that the moment he said it out loud to another person, it would become a thing that required managing. A thing with edges that people would want to comment on. She runs a company, he said. About 400 people. Silence. She built it herself, he added. 12 years. More silence. Karen. I'm not saying anything. I can hear you not saying things very loudly. Ryan, I want you to be careful. Careful of what? I don't know. I don't know her. And you went from, you spent 4 years not doing this, and now some woman sits down at your table, and you go to a diner at 9 at night, and she's sending you articles about fish at 7 in the morning, and she's... Karen paused. She's very different from your world, Ryan. That's all I'm saying. He was quiet for a moment. Different from my world, he repeated. I don't mean it like that. How do you mean it? Karen exhaled. I just mean people like that, people who run things, who have that kind of, I don't know what her life is like. I don't know what she actually wants. And I don't want you to get hurt again. That's it. That's the whole thing. He stood in the cold and thought about Claire saying, I have eaten dinner alone in more hotel restaurants in more cities than I can count. And the way she'd said it without self-pity. Just flat and true. The way people talked about things they'd finally accepted as facts. She's tired, he said. In the same way I'm tired. That's not the same thing, Ryan. Isn't it? Karen didn't have an answer for that. Or she had one, and she decided to keep it, which with Karen was the rarer option. Just be careful, she said finally more softly. That's all. Just be careful with yourself. Yeah, he said. Okay. He went back inside. Emma looked up from her homework, read his face and said nothing, which was how he knew she'd been listening to every word through the screen door. The texting became a conversation. Not a careful one, not the kind where both parties are performing consideration and choosing every word for maximum favorable impression. Those conversations had a specific hollow quality Ryan had always been able to detect even back before Sarah, when he'd had more practice at this kind of thing. They felt like job interviews, like both people were simultaneously auditioning and casting. This wasn't that. Claire texted the way she apparently did everything directly without decoration, with occasional unexpected humor that landed because she didn't signal it was coming. On Wednesday, she sent him a photo of a spreadsheet with the message, "Someone built this model entirely wrong, and I have to fix it before 9 a.m. Send help." He wrote back, "I work in logistics. I fix wrong models for a living." What does it do? What followed was 45 minutes of Ryan actually walking her through a restructuring of the model on his phone, while Emma watched him with deep suspicion from across the couch. "Are you working?" Emma said. "Sort of." "Is it Claire? Eat your apple. You're smiling at your phone again." "Emma, I'm just saying." On Thursday, she called him. Not texted, called. He was in the car between the school pickup and the grocery store. Emma in the back seat already narrating a detailed account of an injustice that had occurred at lunch, involving a spelling test she felt had been scored incorrectly, and his phone rang through the car speakers, and Claire's name came up on the dash, and Emma immediately stopped mid-sentence about the spelling test and went completely unnaturally silent. He answered it. "Hey, am I catching you at a bad time?" "I'm in the car. Emma's in the back." A beat. "Oh. Hi, Emma." From the back seat with extraordinary composure for an 8-year-old, "Hi, Claire. I hear you have opinions about the Cretaceous period." Emma sat up straighter. Ryan could see it in the rearview mirror. The Cretaceous is the most important period in dinosaur history. The Jurassic is what people think is important because of the movies. But scientifically, Claire said, the Cretaceous had more species diversity, and the KPG extinction event alone is worth about 40 years of academic argument. Complete silence from the back seat. Ryan glanced in the mirror. Emma looked like someone had handed her a gift she hadn't expected and wasn't sure yet how to hold. "Yeah," Emma said finally in a much smaller voice. "Exactly. We should have that formal debate sometime," Claire said. "I should warn you, my father made me read The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs twice." "I've read it 3 times, Emma said. Claire laughed, the real one, the surprised one. "Okay, you're better prepared than I am." Emma was glowing. Ryan could feel it from the front seat. His daughter, who approached most new adults with the wariness of a very small, very serious diplomat, was glowing. He made himself look at the road. Time. They met again, 10 days after Callahan's. Claire's suggestion, a Saturday afternoon. Nothing formal, she said she had a meeting in his part of the city in the morning, and could they get coffee after? And Ryan said yes, before he'd finished reading the text, which he recognized as a data point about himself that he was going to have to sit with. He brought Emma. Not as a test. Not deliberately. Emma's regular Saturday morning activity had been canceled, and Karen wasn't available, and Ryan had looked at Emma and looked at his phone and thought about the specific risk of meeting this woman alone in the daylight without the accidental courage that November nights and borrowed jackets provided, and he'd said, "You want to come get coffee with me?" And Emma had said, "Is it with Claire?" And he'd said, "Yes." And Emma had already had her shoes on before he finished the word. They met at a coffee place 4 blocks from the park. Not Mercer Street, somewhere new neutral ground for all parties. Claire was already there when they arrived. Sitting at a corner table, no jacket this time, just a gray sweater and her hair down, and she looked different. Not less herself. More herself actually, in the way that people who were usually in professional armor looked more genuinely themselves when the armor was off. She looked up when they walked in and smiled. And it was the real version, immediately no transition. And Emma saw it and grabbed Ryan's hand. "That's her," Emma whispered at a volume that was not actually a whisper. "I know Em. She looks like someone who knows things." Claire stood up. She and Emma looked at each other with the mutual seriousness of two people who understood they were both being evaluated. "I ordered you a hot chocolate," Claire said to Emma. "I guessed, if you don't want it." "I love hot chocolate," Emma said. "Did you really read it 3 times? My father made me read it twice. The 3rd time was my own idea." Emma sat down with the decisiveness of a judge who had heard enough testimony. "Okay," she said. "I have questions." What followed was 35 minutes of the most thorough conversation about late Cretaceous fauna that Ryan had ever witnessed in a coffee shop or possibly anywhere. He mostly listened. He got his coffee. He watched his daughter, who had spent the last 4 years being carefully protectively, the center of a life that had pulled inward after loss, lean across the table toward this woman with her elbows on the surface and her hot chocolate going cold because she kept forgetting to drink it. And he watched Claire match her question for question, detail for detail, completely genuine. At one point, Emma said with great seriousness, "Most people pretend to care about dinosaurs because I like them. You actually care." "I actually care," Claire said. "That's different." "I know." Emma looked at Ryan. The look said, "I have completed my assessment, and I have findings." He raised his eyebrows slightly. She gave the smallest nod. He drank his coffee. When Emma excused herself to use the bathroom, the quality of the silence between them shifted. Not uncomfortable, just different. Daylight different. Saturday afternoon different. No borrowed jackets, no November emergency. Just 2 people across a coffee shop table. "She's extraordinary," Claire said. "I know. She's also frightening." "I know that too." Claire turned her coffee cup in both hands. "Ryan, I want to be honest with you about something." He waited. "I don't do this," she said. I'm not someone who sits at strangers' tables in restaurants. I'm not someone who texts people articles about anglerfish at 7 in the morning. I'm not someone who reorganizes my Saturday morning because—" She stopped. Started again. "I run a company. I have a board. I have people who depend on me to be consistent and rational and not impulsive. And I am all of those things almost all of the time." She paused. "I don't know what happened at that restaurant. I saw you sitting there and something in me said, 'Go,' and I went." He looked at her. "I'm glad you did," he said. "I know. I need you to know that I'm not playing anything. I'm not performing something. I'm not looking for a project or a distraction, or I'm just—" She exhaled. "I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I haven't not known what I'm doing in a very long time. And I need you to know that because I think you deserve to know that, and because if this is going to be—" She stopped again. "If it's going to be what?" he asked very quietly. She looked at him steadily. "If it's going to be real, then I don't want to start it with either of us pretending we have it figured out." I thought about what Karen had said. Be careful with yourself. He thought about Emma, on the other side of a coffee shop wall, coming back in approximately 90 seconds, with follow-up questions about KPG boundary sediment. He thought about a table set for 2 and an empty chair, and the specific weight of deciding finally to stand up and leave, and then not leaving. "I spent 4 years figuring everything out," he said. "Every single thing. What Emma needs, what the budget needs, what the schedule needs, what I'm supposed to feel, and when I'm supposed to feel it, and how much of it I'm allowed to feel before it becomes a problem. 4 years of figuring it out." He looked at her. "Not figuring it out sounds okay to me." The bathroom door opened across the coffee shop. Emma came back with fresh information already organized behind her eyes. "I thought of 2 more arguments," she announced, climbing back into her chair. "I was afraid of that," Claire said. And Ryan sat back in his chair, both hands around his coffee, and let the morning happen around him. His daughter's voice, and this woman's responses, and the sound of a Saturday carrying on outside the window, and felt something he'd almost forgotten the name of. Safe. He felt safe. Not because anything was resolved. Not because anything was certain or figured out or lined up correctly, but because two people were sitting across from him who were both in completely different ways exactly who they appeared to be, and that he was realizing was rarer than he'd remembered. The first time things got complicated, it came from a direction he hadn't been watching. It was 3 weeks after the coffee shop, a Thursday. Ryan was at work the distribution center on the east side, the one that smelled like cardboard and industrial cleaning solution, and the particular exhaustion of fluorescent lighting, when his colleague Marcus stopped by his desk with the expression of someone who had information they were not sure how to deliver. Marcus was 42, divorced, good at his job, the kind of man who collected small pieces of other people's business, not for malice, but out of genuine bottomless curiosity about human beings. Ryan liked him mostly. He also knew exactly what that expression meant. "What?" Ryan said without looking up from his screen. I just heard something." "Marcus?" "People talk." "Marcus what?" Marcus sat on the edge of the adjacent desk. "Is it true you're seeing Claire Kensington?" Ryan's hands went still on the keyboard. "Where did you hear that?" "Man, she was in the news last month for the Hargrove acquisition. She's Ryan. She's not just a company CEO, she's like..." Marcus seemed to be searching for the right scale. "She's on the cover of business magazines. Her company's been valued at..." "I know what her company's valued at." Marcus stared at him. "You know. She told me." "She told you." "Marcus." Ryan finally looked up. "What's the point you're trying to make?" Marcus spread his hands. Not unkindly, genuinely trying to navigate something. "I'm just saying that's a different world, man. That's board meetings and press coverage and people who care who she's spending time with. That's not..." "I'm not saying you're not..." He stopped. "Not what?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. Not mean. Uncomfortable. "I'm saying she's the kind of person where who she dates becomes a story. And if you're not ready for that..." "I'm not dating her." He said it automatically. Then he sat with what he'd just said. Marcus looked at him. "Are you sure?" Marcus said very carefully. Ryan turned back to his screen. The thing was, he wasn't sure. That was the problem. He wasn't sure what it was because he and Claire hadn't named it, and he'd been grateful for that, the space of not naming the room. It gave him to exist in something without having to decide what it was and what it meant and whether he was ready for it. But Marcus sitting on the edge of the next desk saying, "Is it true you're seeing Claire Kensington," had done something to that space, had put a shape on it that he hadn't been ready to see from the outside. "Get back to work, Marcus," he said. Marcus got back to work, but the shape stayed. And that evening, putting Emma to bed, listening to her describe the drawings she'd made in art class with a detail and seriousness that would have been appropriate for a museum curator. Ryan looked at his daughter's face in the lamplight and thought, "What am I doing?" Not the version of that question that was fear. The version that was genuine. The version that came from a place of actual responsibility to Emma, who had survived enormous loss and built her whole safe world around exactly one constant, reliable person, and who had looked at Claire in a coffee shop with the open, trusting face of a child who had decided to believe in something. "What are you doing, Ryan Carter? What are you actually doing?" He turned off Emma's lamp. He stood in the hallway outside her door for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen, picked up his phone, and called Claire. She answered on the second ring. "Hey." "Are we something?" he said. A pause. Not a surprised one, the thinking kind. "I think we are," she said. "But I think you're calling because you're scared about what that means." He leaned against the kitchen counter. "Marcus at my job knew who you were." "Okay." "He'd read about you, the acquisition." The Hargrove acquisition was in 4 publications. It was a significant deal. Claire. Ryan. "I coordinate distribution logistics," he said. "I have a company car that's 12 years old. I buy Emma's school clothes during the August sale at Target, because the regular price version is $20 more and $20 matters to me. That's my life. That's what I have." Silence. "I know," she said. "Does that..." He stopped, started over. Does that bother you actually? Because I need you to tell me honestly if... Ryan. Her voice was very even, not sharp, even the way she got when she was being precise. I sat at this bar at Callahan's for 40 minutes, watching a man in a borrowed jacket touch a badly tied tie with 2 fingers and try to hold himself together with everything he had. And I thought that man is real. Everything in that restaurant was performing. Every conversation, every table, every transaction. And you were just real. She paused. You being a logistics coordinator doesn't bother me. You worrying that it should is the only thing that worries me. I was quiet. I just need to know, he said, that Emma's not going to be sitting across from someone at a coffee shop one day, and I'm not going to be... The sentence wouldn't finish itself. You're not going to be left at another table, she said, quietly, directly. I understand what you're asking, and I understand why you're asking it. And I'm not going to promise you something I can't guarantee, because I don't do that. But I can tell you that when I decide something is real, I don't change my mind for reasons that have nothing to do with the thing itself. He let out a breath he hadn't fully known he was holding. Okay, he said. Okay. Yeah. He stood up from the counter. Okay. Ryan? Yeah. Stop waiting for me to decide you're not enough, she said. I already made that decision. You are. Stop arguing with it. He almost laughed. Good night, Claire. Good night, Ryan. He put the phone down on the counter. He stood in the kitchen for a moment in the quiet of the apartment. Emma asleep down the hall. The November night pressed against the windows. Then he went and got a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table and let himself, for the first time in a very long time, sit inside something that felt good without immediately looking for the exit. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Ryan's phone at 7:43 a.m. while he was standing at the kitchen counter watching Emma negotiate with her cereal. Kensington Group Annual Year-End Dinner. Friday the 14th. The Meridian Hotel. I know it's a lot, but I want you there. See, he read it twice. Then he put the phone face down on the counter and finished making Emma's lunch. Emma watched him from the counter stool. She'd gotten very good over the past several weeks at reading the specific geometry of her father's silence, which silences were tired, which were sad, which were the kind where he was working something out that he wasn't ready to say yet. What did she send? Emma asked. How do you know it was her? Because you made the face. I don't make a face. Daddy, you absolutely make a face. He put her lunch bag in her backpack and zipped it. She invited me to a work dinner. Emma chewed her cereal. A fancy one. Probably. Are you going to go? He picked up his phone. He read the message a third time. I know it's a lot. Claire had written that deliberately. She'd known when she typed it that those 4 words were the most important ones in the sentence. She wasn't pretending it wasn't what it was. She was telling him she understood the weight of the ask and was asking anyway. I don't know, he said. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then very carefully, the way she approached things she'd been thinking about for a while. Daddy, are you scared of her friends? He looked at his daughter. I'm not scared, he said. It's okay if you are. Karen says it's okay to be scared of things, as long as you don't let the scared part make your decisions for you. She picked up her spoon. Karen says that a lot, actually. Karen says a lot of things. She's usually right, though. He stood there for a moment with his coffee going cold in his hand, looking at his 8-year-old daughter, who had somehow in the years since her mother died, developed the emotional intelligence of someone 4 times her age, and he thought, you are the best thing I have ever done, and you terrify me constantly. Go get your shoes, he said. Are you going to go? Get your shoes, Emma. She got her shoes. But she was smiling when she left the kitchen, which told him everything she didn't say out loud. He texted Claire back. Tell me what time. He borrowed a suit this time. Not the jacket, an actual suit. Charcoal gray from his neighbor Dennis, who was 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, but close enough, and Dennis had stood in the hallway and watched Ryan try it on, and said with the blunt honesty of a man who'd known Ryan for 6 years. You clean up better than you think you do. Karen came over to watch Emma for the evening. She arrived 30 minutes early, which Ryan knew was not about Emma and entirely about getting a look at him before he left. And she stood in the kitchen doorway and crossed her arms and studied him with the expression she'd been wearing for the last 3 weeks, the one that was simultaneously proud and nervous and trying very hard to look like neither. "The Meridian Hotel," she said. "Yes." "Ryan, the Meridian has a dress code that—" "The suit is fine, Karen." "I was going to say the suit looks good." He turned around. She was smiling, the real version, the one she didn't usually let him see, because Karen believed in maintaining certain emotional positions in their sibling dynamic. Her eyes were doing something that he was going to pretend he didn't notice. "Don't," he said. "I'm not doing anything." "Karen, I'm genuinely not." She uncrossed her arms. You look like yourself again, the old version, before." She stopped, recalibrated. "That's all." He picked up the borrowed jacket he'd laid over the back of the chair. Emma appeared in the doorway behind Karen, looked her father up and down with critical precision and said, "The tie is wrong." "Emma, the tie is fine. It's the wrong blue." She disappeared and came back 45 seconds later with the navy tie with the gold diamonds. She held it out. He looked at it. He looked at her. He took off the tie he was wearing and let Emma put the right one on. The Meridian Hotel was the kind of place that had a person whose entire job was to open the door, which was the first signal to Ryan that this evening existed in a different category from any evening he'd recently inhabited. The lobby had ceilings high enough to make sound behave differently. Voices got swallowed up. Footsteps got careful. Everything took on a quality of occasion, whether you wanted it to or not. Hy gave his name and the reception desk. He was on the list. Of course he was on the list. Claire had put him on the list. Claire, who had asked him to come, knowing exactly where he came from and exactly where this room was, and choosing the distance between those two things as something worth bridging. He walked into the main dining room. It was full of people who looked like they belonged there. Not in an unkind way, just as a fact, the way some spaces selected for certain kinds of ease. A comfort with chandeliers and 5-course menus, and the particular choreography of formal business socializing. Ryan could do most of it. He wasn't graceless. But there was a difference between being able to do something and being somewhere that had always been yours, and he felt that difference in the specific way he held his shoulders as he scanned the room. He found Claire before she found him. She was across the room talking to a man in a dark suit, late 50s silver at his temples. The posture of someone who had been important long enough that importance had become his resting state. She was listening to him with her head slightly tilted, and even from this distance, Ryan could see the precise calibration of her attention, present, engaged, but controlled. The face she wore in rooms like this. Then she looked up and saw Ryan, and the face changed. Not dramatically, she was too practiced for dramatic. But something in it shifted the way a room shifts when someone opens a window, just a change in the quality of the air. She said something to the silver-templed man briefly and crossed the room toward Ryan. "You came," she said. "You asked. I wasn't sure you would. I told you I would." "I know." I was still not entirely sure. She looked at him for a moment, taking him in the suit, Emma's tie, all of it. And something in her expression was warm in a way that had nothing to do with the room or the occasion. "You look good, Ryan. Dennis is 2 inches taller than me, but I appreciate the effort." She laughed, the real one, and caught it quickly, because they were in a room where catching things quickly was a skill people developed. "Come on, I'll introduce you." He got through the first 30 minutes on the particular fuel of social adrenaline and the stubborn determination not to confirm any version of himself that was smaller than the truth. Claire moved through introductions smoothly. She was practiced at this, effortlessly practiced inserting context with each name without making it feel clinical. "This is Ryan Carter. We met this fall. Ryan works in logistics operations. Clean. True." She didn't over-explain, which he appreciated because over-explanation would have signaled that his presence needed justification, and she was not in the business of justifying things she'd decided. Most people were fine, genuinely fine. A few were interesting. A woman named Patricia, who ran supply chain for a manufacturing group and lit up when she found out what Ryan did and spent 7 minutes in genuine professional conversation with him that felt more natural than anything else in the room. A younger man named Jerome, who was Claire's head of product, who shook Ryan's hand and said, "She's mentioned you," with a directness that Ryan found refreshing. A couple of others whose names he filed away, and whose conversations were easy enough. And then there was Garrett Boyle. He came at Ryan from the side, not literally, but in the way that some people made their approach, angling in from a conversation nearby, letting it seem accidental, so that by the time you registered the arrival, it had already happened and the terms of the interaction were set. Garrett Boyle was approximately 50 expensive suit, the kind of confident that had been expensive to acquire and needed regular maintenance. And he looked at Ryan, the way certain men looked at things they had already decided were beneath consideration, but were going to engage with anyway for the entertainment value. He introduced himself as Claire's largest investor. "Ryan Carter," Ryan said, and shook the hand. "Claire mentioned you might be joining us," Garrett said, and the way he said might was a complete sentence by itself. "I'm here," Ryan said. "So you are." Garrett took a drink from his glass and looked around the room with the proprietary ease of a man who felt rooms like this belonged to him, whether he paid for them or not. "And what do you do, Ryan?" "Logistics coordination, distribution management." Just that. The most expensive single-syllable Ryan had ever received. "And you and Claire know each other how exactly?" "We met this fall." "Socially?" "Yes." Garrett nodded slowly, the way people nodded when they were listening to something they'd already made up their minds about. "Claire's extraordinary, you know," he said conversationally. "What she's built. The Hargrove acquisition alone. I've been in this industry 30 years. I've never seen anyone move a deal like that. She's in a different category." He paused. "She has been since she was 26. Ryan looked at him steadily. "I know. Does she have, I'm curious. Does she talk to you about the work? The actual work, the board structure, the growth strategy, where she wants to take the company in the next 5 years?" "We talk about a lot of things." "Of course." Another slow nod. "She's always been generous. With her time with her." He seemed to consider something. "She has a very open heart. It's one of her more notable qualities. Also occasionally one of her vulnerabilities." Ryan was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. He counted them. "I think," he said very evenly, "that Claire's capable of deciding what's a vulnerability and what isn't." Garrett looked at him. Really looked for the first time in the conversation, as though Ryan had done something mildly surprising, by answering in a complete sentence that pushed back. "Of course she is," Garrett said, and smiled the smile of someone who hadn't actually conceded anything. "Enjoy your evening." He moved away. Ryan stood where he was for a moment. He picked up his water glass and drank from it, and looked across the room to where Claire was in conversation with a group of people near the far wall, and she glanced over and caught his eye and raised an eyebrow slightly. "Okay." And he gave her the smallest nod. Fine. He was fine. But something had happened to the air in the room. The dinner itself was 5 courses and 2 hours, and Ryan got through it the same way he'd gotten through the first part of the evening conversation. By conversation. Genuine where he could be genuine. Careful where carefulness was required. He was seated 2 chairs down from Claire, separated by Jerome, and a woman named Sandra from the legal team, and they caught each other's eyes across the table several times in the way of 2 people who had developed without discussing it a private language of small signals. But on the far side of the table, Garrett Boyle was talking. He was always talking, the kind of talker who maintained continuous conversational dominance, the way some people maintained territory. Always a story, moving, always a point, being made, always an anecdote that positioned him at the center. Ryan noticed as the evening went on the way certain people at the table oriented toward Garrett without seeming to decide to the way a room rearranged itself around a magnetic field. He also noticed midway through the 3rd course that Garrett had said something that made the table laugh, and then looked directly at Ryan with the kind of steady measuring look that wasn't aggressive enough to call out, but wasn't accidental. Ryan laughed along with the table. He held Garrett's gaze for a beat longer than was strictly necessary. Then he turned back to his conversation with Sandra, who had been telling him about a contract dispute that was genuinely interesting, and he stayed there. After dinner in the loose standing portion of the evening when people moved around with their dessert and their drinks, Claire found him near the window. "Garrett talked to you," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Briefly." "What did he say?" "He told me you were extraordinary and that your open heart was a vulnerability." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "Ryan, I'm not upset. You're doing the jaw thing." "I don't have a jaw thing." "You have absolutely a jaw thing. Emma told me about it last week." She stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice, not because she was upset, but because this conversation didn't belong to the room. "I'm sorry. He had no right." "Claire." He said it the way she sometimes said his name, quiet, precise, meaning stop. "I'm a grown man. I can handle Garrett Boyle." She looked at him. "I know you can. That's not what I'm apologizing for." "Then what?" "I'm apologizing because I brought you into a room where someone looked at you like you didn't belong here, and I should have—" "You should have what?" "Not invited me." She didn't answer. "Claire." He waited until she looked at him. "I don't need you to protect me from rooms. I need you to not apologize for the fact that you're in them." She was quiet. "I grew up without money," she said after a moment. "I know what it feels like to be in a room like this and feel the distance, and I don't want you to feel that because of me." "I felt it," he said honestly. "A little, not because of you." "Ryan, it's okay to feel it. It doesn't mean the room wins." He picked up his water glass. "Garrett Boyle is very impressed with himself. That's a him problem." She looked at him for a long moment, with an expression he was still learning to read. It was the one she got when he said something that landed somewhere she hadn't expected. "Stop being reasonable," she said. "It's making it very hard to stay upset on your behalf." "Good. Don't be upset on my behalf. Come tell me about the Hargrove acquisition, because apparently it was the deal of the decade, and I've only heard your version." "You've heard my version. At the diner, you mentioned it. 3 sentences, then you changed the subject. Because it was your turn. It's my turn again now. Talk to me." And she did, standing by the window while the party moved and ebbed around them. She walked him through the Hargrove acquisition with the specificity and passion of someone talking about something they'd built with their hands. And Ryan listened, the way he always listened to her fully, without performing attention. Actually there, and he understood maybe 60% of the financial architecture and 100% of what it had cost her to do it. And that he was learning was the more important number. "Tatai." He called Karen at midnight from the car. "Still alive," he said. "Thank God. How was it?" "Fine. Good. Complicated." "Complicated how?" "There was a man. An investor. He tried to find the precise word. He was the kind of man who makes you feel like you're being measured against a standard he invented. And I didn't let him." A pause. "Good," Karen said. "But it made me think." "About what?" "About what this actually looks like, from the outside. She's got a board, and investors, and people who are going to look at her, and then look at me, and do the math." "Ryan. I'm not saying it's her. It's not her. She's—" He stopped at a red light. The street was empty at this hour, the city doing its quiet midnight thing. "She's the least complicated part of the whole situation. Which is strange, right? She should be the most complicated part." "Maybe that means something," Karen said carefully. "Yeah." He sat at the red light. "Maybe it does." He drove home through empty streets. He let himself into the apartment, quietly checked on Emma. Asleep, starfish position, completely committed, and stood in her doorway for a moment, the way he often did, using her uncomplicated sleeping face as a kind of reset. Then he went to bed. And at 1:17 a.m., his phone lit up. "You still awake?" "See." "Yeah," he typed back. "Thank you for tonight, for staying." He looked at the ceiling. "I almost didn't come," he typed. Then deleted it. Then typed it again and sent it because the whole point was honesty. 3 dots. "Then I know. I'm glad you did anyway. The Hargrove deal was impressive, Claire. You understood the financial structure about 60%. That's more than most people in the room. Garrett Boyle didn't think so. A longer pause this time. Garrett Boyle, she wrote, has been trying to tell me what I should want since I was 28 years old. He has been wrong every single time. Ryan read that twice. Go to sleep, he typed. You have an 8 a.m. call. I rescheduled it. Of course you did. Ryan. Yeah. I don't need you to fit into that room. I need you to keep being who you are. That's not the same thing. He set the phone down on his chest and looked at the ceiling for a while. Then he picked it up. Good night, Claire. Good night. The story broke on a Wednesday morning. Ryan found out the way he found out most things he didn't want to know from Marcus, who appeared at his desk at 8:15 a.m. with his phone already in his hand and the expression of someone who wasn't sure if they were delivering news or a verdict. Don't shoot the messenger, Marcus said. Ryan looked at the screen. It was a gossip column. Not the tabloid kind, the business gossip kind, the kind that lived in the gray area between journalism and cocktail party conversation, and had a readership that was mostly people in finance and tech who told themselves they only skimmed it. The headline was not subtle. Kensington Group CEO's new company, a single dad from the South Side. He took the phone from Marcus's hand and read it. It was 3 paragraphs. The first established Claire's business credentials and recent acquisition. The second noted that she had been seen publicly with an unidentified man at a coffee shop in November, and again at the Meridian Hotel dinner last Friday, where sources described the man as outside Claire's usual circle. That was the phrase outside Claire's usual circle, which was doing a lot of specific work in a short space. The third paragraph was the one that sat in his stomach like a stone. Sources close to Kensington Group question whether the relationship is a distraction for the CEO at a critical point in the company's expansion. Others wonder what precisely a single father working in logistics brings to the table beyond proximity to one of the city's most powerful women. What precisely a single father working in logistics brings to the table. He read it twice. He handed the phone back to Marcus. Ryan, Marcus said. I'm fine. You don't have to. Marcus, I'm fine. Get back to work. He spent the next 4 hours doing his job. He did it well. He always did it well. That was the thing. Nobody in that article would ever know or care about. That Ryan Carter was genuinely good at what he did. That the distribution network he'd redesigned 18 months ago had saved the company $400,000 in operational costs, that 3 people had been promoted partly on the strength of his recommendations. He did his job, and he answered his emails, and at noon he ate a sandwich at his desk and looked at his phone 7 times and did not call Claire. She called him at 12:47. He picked up on the first ring. I saw it, he said before she could start. Ryan, I'm so sorry. I don't know who. It doesn't matter who. It absolutely matters who. I'm going to find out and... Claire. He lowered his voice. He was still at his desk, the open floor plan of the distribution office around him, Marcus visibly not looking in his direction. It doesn't matter who. What matters is it going to cause problems for you at the company? No. With Garrett, a pause. Garrett doesn't run my company. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. She was quiet for a moment. He called me this morning. And I told him that who I spend my time with is not a board agenda item. Her voice was steady, not angry, controlled. The voice she used when she'd already decided something and was simply informing the world. He suggested that the optics of the situation could be a concern for investors during the expansion. Ryan's jaw tightened. The jaw thing, apparently. And you said? I said that I built this company without his permission, and I didn't plan to run my personal life with it. He was quiet. Ryan, I need you to hear me, she said. This Garrett, the article, the optics, none of this is going to make me change anything. That is not how I operate. I know how you operate. Then. But Emma, he said. Silence. Has she seen it? Claire asked, and her voice changed. The controlled edge softened into something more careful. She's 8. She doesn't read business gossip columns. He ran a hand over his face. but Karen will see it. And Karen will tell her carefully the way Karen does things, and Emma will understand more of it than any 8-year-old should, because Emma always understands more than she's supposed to, and then she'll look at me with those eyes, and I'm going to have to—" He stopped. The thing he was trying to say was too big to fit into a sentence standing at his desk at work on a Wednesday. "I know," Claire said quietly. "Do you, Ryan? I'm not blaming you. I'm not." He pressed his fingers against his eyes for a second. "I just need to think." She was quiet. She let him have it. "Okay," she said finally. "Think. Call me when you're ready." Claire. "Yeah. The article." He paused. "It was wrong about almost everything. But the part about Emma, about me being a single father, that part was true. And I need to know that you understand what that means. Not for the optics, for what it means. Because Emma is—" His voice dropped. "She's already lost one person, and if something—" "Ryan, stop." Her voice was soft, firm, both. "Look at me. You're on the phone. Stop." He heard her breathe. "I am not going anywhere. I am not a person who makes decisions lightly and reverses them because someone writes 3 paragraphs and Garrett Boyle has feelings. I sat down at your table 3 weeks ago because I decided to. I am still deciding, every day." A pause. "Emma is not a complication. She is part of what makes you who you are. And who you are is exactly why I'm still on this phone." He stood in the middle of his office. The fluorescent lights hummed. The distribution center carried on around him, forklifts, somewhere a printer running Marcus, and 3 other colleagues having a conversation about something completely unrelated. The machinery of an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. He thought about the article. What precisely a single father working in logistics brings to the table. He thought about Emma's hands tying a navy blue tie. About Mercer Street Diner and cold coffee and Johnny Cash. About a Saturday morning and a debate about the Cretaceous period and his daughter's face going soft with the specific trust of a child deciding to believe in something new. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Yeah, okay." "Are you sure?" "No," he said honestly. "But I'm okay anyway." He could hear her smile. "That's all I needed." He hung up. He stood at his desk for another moment. Marcus appeared at the edge of his peripheral vision, and then very deliberately found something to look at on his own computer screen. Ryan sat down. He opened his work queue. He did his job. That evening, he picked Emma up from school. Normal Tuesday, she came out with her backpack half open the way it always was. 3 different art projects stacked in her arms, a story already in progress about something that had happened at lunch. He listened. He drove. He helped carry the art projects up the stairs. When Emma was settled at the kitchen table with her homework, Ryan went to stand by the kitchen window with his coffee and thought about what Karen had said weeks ago now. "Be careful with yourself." I thought about how that advice had felt like a warning at the time, and now felt like something he needed to understand better. Because being careful with himself and being willing to be hurt were not. He was realizing the same thing. You couldn't actually protect yourself from the possibility of loss. He knew that better than most people. Loss came whether you prepared for it or not. Sarah had taught him that on a Tuesday morning in October, without any warning at all. What you could do was decide what was worth the risk. He looked at Emma, bent over her homework pencil, moving with the focused intensity she brought to everything she cared about. He thought about Claire's voice on the phone. "Emma is not a complication. She is part of what makes you who you are." He made a decision. He put down his coffee and walked to the kitchen table and sat across from Emma. She looked up. "I need to tell you something," he said. Emma put down her pencil. When Ryan sat down with that particular tone, she gave him her full attention, had done since she was 5, since the year she'd learned that certain conversations required that. "You know, Claire and I have been spending time together." "Yes," Emma said carefully. "Some people are writing things about it, about us, not nice things." Emma's eyes went very still. "What kind of things?" "The kind that don't really know us, but have opinions about us anyway. About whether we belong in the same world." Emma was quiet for a moment. He could see her processing it, the left foot starting its pendulum swing under the table. Because she has a lot of money, Emma said. Partly. And because we don't. Partly. Emma picked up her pencil. She looked at it for a second. Then she put it down again. Daddy, do you like her? Yeah, Em, I do. Does she like you? I think so. Does she like me? He looked at his daughter. She went home after the coffee shop and looked up 3 new Cretaceous arguments, specifically to be ready for your next conversation. She sent me an article about anglerfish because you mentioned them one time. She rescheduled an 8 a.m. call last week because... He stopped. Yeah, Em, she likes you. Emma absorbed this. Then, Emma said, with the complete logical clarity of an 8-year-old who had cut straight through everything non-essential. Who cares what those people say? He looked at his daughter. Who cares? She said again, not asking this time. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. You're right, he said. I know, said Emma, and picked up her pencil and went back to her homework. He called Claire at 9 that night. I'm not pulling back, he said when she picked up. I know, she said. I just needed a day. I know that too. Emma says who cares what those people say. A beat. Then quietly, Emma is the smartest person in this story. Don't tell her that. She already knows. Claire laughed. He sat in the kitchen in the dark. Emma asleep, apartment quiet. November doing its thing outside, and he talked to Claire for an hour about nothing important. About a bad movie she'd watched on a flight. About Emma's homework on ecosystems. About the coffee at Mercer Street, and whether the new batch was better or worse than the last. About small things, real things, the kind of things that built a life between 2 people in the ordinary intervals. When they finally said goodnight, Ryan sat in the silence for a while. He thought about Garrett Boyle, and the article, and the room at the Meridian that had felt like it belonged to other people. He thought about all of it. And then he let it go, not because it didn't matter, but because he'd made his decision, and his decision was the only thing in that equation that actually belonged to him. He turned off the kitchen light. He went to bed, and for the first time since the article had appeared on Marcus's phone that morning, his jaw unclenched completely. The holidays came the way they always did, fast, and with specific emotional weight that Ryan had learned to manage the way you managed a bad knee, carefully, with advanced planning, and with the understanding that certain days were going to hurt, regardless of how well you prepared for them. Thanksgiving was Karen's. It had been Karen's since the year Sarah died, when Karen had shown up at Ryan's apartment at 10 in the morning with 2 grocery bags and a determination that nobody in her family was spending that day alone, and it had simply stayed that way by unspoken agreement ever since. Ryan brought Emma and a pie from Mercer Street, always the same pie, the apple Emma's standing order, and they spent the day in Karen's house with the particular controlled chaos of a family that had learned to build new traditions over the places where old ones used to be. This year Emma asked on the drive over if Claire was coming. No, Ryan said. Why not? Because it's Karen's Thanksgiving. It's family. Emma was quiet for a moment. Is Claire not family? He kept his eyes on the road. It's been 2 months, Em. Almost 3. Emma. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. She looked out the window. I was just asking. He reached over and put his hand briefly on her shoulder. Next year, he said before he decided to say it. Maybe next year. Emma looked at him. He could feel it, that particular look, the one that saw through the sentence to the thing underneath it, the thing that was actually a commitment disguised as a maybe. Okay, she said, like she'd filed it. Claire spent Thanksgiving with her father in Connecticut. She'd told Ryan this the week before briefly, in the way she mentioned personal things directly and without overlay. Her father was in his late 70s, still sharp, retired from the university, lived in the same house where Claire had grown up with the dinosaur books on the wall. She'd driven up Wednesday night and was coming back Sunday. She'd sent Ryan a photo on Thursday afternoon, her father's kitchen table, mismatched chairs, a pie that looked significantly worse than the Mercer Street version with the message "Dad made pie." I love him, but this is not extraordinary. Ryan had shown the photo to Emma. Emma had looked at it with the solemnity of a judge reviewing evidence. "The crust is wrong," she said. "Don't ever tell her that." "I wouldn't. That's rude." She handed the phone back. "Tell her the filling looks good." He'd texted Emma says the filling looks good. Claire had responded with 3 laughing emojis, and then, "She's being diplomatic. I appreciate it. Tell her the crust debate is tabled until I can do better." He hadn't needed to tell Emma. Emma had read it over his shoulder and said with quiet satisfaction, "I like her, Daddy," and gone back to watching the parade on Karen's television. Karen from across the room had been watching all of this. She hadn't said anything. But at some point during the afternoon, she'd sat down next to Ryan on the couch and put her head on his shoulder the way she hadn't done since they were kids, and they'd watched the parade in silence for a while, and Karen had said very quietly, "She's good for you." "Yeah," he said. "She's good for Emma too." "Yeah." Karen was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong," she said. "Earlier, when I said be careful, I meant it right, but I was wrong about I was thinking about the differences. The gap. I wasn't thinking about the fact that you've spent 4 years being careful, and look what it got you." He looked at his sister. "It got me you," he said. "And Emma. And the Mercer Street Diner apple pie." Karen made a sound that was partially a laugh and partially something else. "Don't make me cry on Thanksgiving. Don't give me speeches on Thanksgiving." She lifted her head and straightened up, and was Karen again, composed and certain, and she went to check on the turkey, and Ryan watched her go, and thought about how lucky he was in a specific hard-earned way, that he didn't take lightly to have people who loved him imperfectly and consistently and without conditions. Claire came back from Connecticut on Sunday afternoon, and by Sunday evening she was at Ryan's kitchen table with a container of her father's leftover pie, the bad crust version, because she'd told her father she was bringing it to someone who would give it an honest review, and her father had packed it himself and written on the container in black marker for the young lady with the dinosaur opinions. Emma had held the container with both hands and read the note 3 times. "He wrote that for me," she said. "He wrote that for you," Claire said. Emma looked at the container. Then she looked up at Claire with an expression Ryan had seen only a handful of times. Open, unguarded, the face she'd worn the day they'd gotten the class hamster, and she hadn't known yet how to contain the feeling. "Can I meet him someday?" Claire looked at Emma for a moment. Then she looked at Ryan across the table, and something passed between them. Quick, complete, the kind of communication that didn't need words. "Yeah," Claire said. "I think he'd really like that." Emma carried the container to the counter with the care of someone transporting something precious. Then she came back, sat down, and said, "Okay, we're eating this, but I'm going to be honest." "I expect nothing less," Claire said. The crust was in fact wrong. Emma delivered this verdict with compassion and specificity. Claire agreed with every point. Ryan ate 2 slices and said it was the best bad pie he'd ever had, which was true, and Claire threw a dish towel at him, which Emma found deeply satisfying. It was the best Sunday evening Ryan had had in 4 years. I knew it while it was happening. That was the thing, he didn't have to look back at it later to recognize it. He sat at his own kitchen table with his daughter and this woman who had walked into his worst night and refused to leave it, and he knew in real time that this was the shape of something good. He held on to that, because what came next tried to take it apart. The second article was worse than the first. It appeared on a Monday morning 15 days before Christmas in the same publication as the first, but with a different byline, which meant someone had decided the story had legs, which meant more than one person was feeding it. This one had a photo. Not a candid photo from the Meridian Hotel dinner taken from across the room, the angle slightly off the way. Phone photos taken at a distance always were. Ryan and Claire standing by the window talking. He was in Dennis's charcoal suit and Emma's tie. She was in the dark blue dress she'd worn that night. The caption reads, CEO Claire Kensington with unidentified companion at Kensington Group annual dinner. The article itself was longer this time. It covered the Hargrove acquisition, the company's upcoming expansion plans, the pressure Claire was under from investors going into the new year. Then, in the 4th paragraph, sources within Kensington Group's investor circle describe Kensington's personal life as a growing point of discussion at the board level, with some questioning whether her recent relationship with a single father of modest means represents a distraction at a pivotal moment for the company. One source speaking anonymously described the situation as a charity project, suggesting the CEO may be conflating professional instincts to invest in undervalued assets with her personal choices. A charity project. Ryan read the phrase 4 times. Each time it landed in a different place, first in his chest, then lower, settling finally into something that felt less like pain and more like cold. He didn't call Claire. He didn't call Karen. He put his phone in his desk drawer, and he worked for 6 hours, and he picked up Emma and made dinner and put her to bed, and then he sat in the kitchen and stared at the wall for a while. A charity project. He turned the phrase over. He looked at it from every angle. He tried to find the part of it that was untrue. Claire had said explicitly more than once that it wasn't pity, that what she felt for him was not adjacent to pity in any way, and he believed her. He did believe her. But believing something in your chest and having that belief hold steady. When someone in print called it a charity project in front of an audience of people who already had an opinion about you, those were 2 different tests, and he was failing the second one. He thought about the dinner at the Meridian, about Garrett Boyle measuring him with a look, about the room that hadn't quite belonged to him, no matter how still he stood in it. He thought about Marcus, that first morning phone already in hand. He thought about the photo Ryan Carter in someone else's suit standing next to one of the most powerful women in the city, described as unidentified companion. He wasn't unidentified. He just wasn't. He wasn't the kind of person those rooms named. He was the kind of person those rooms photographed at a distance and then described in terms of what he lacked. He sat in the kitchen for a long time. At 10:23 p.m., Claire called. He let it ring. He sat there and let it ring and heard it go to voicemail, and the silence after was so loud he had to push back from the table. She called again at 10:31. He picked up. "You saw it," she said. "Yes." "Ryan. A charity project." He said it flat. Not angry, he wasn't angry. He was something else. "That's what they're calling it." "That is one anonymous source who—" "Claire." She stopped. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to answer it honestly, not the way you answer things to reassure me. Actually, honestly." "Okay. Has this what they're saying? The investor concerns. Garrett, has any of it made you question it? Any part of it?" Silence. "Answer honestly," he said. "No," she said. "Not the way you mean. Not I have never questioned whether you're worth it. I have never. But." A long pause. "But," she said carefully, "I have sat with the question of whether I'm being fair to you. Whether bringing you into this, the attention, the opinions, the things people are going to say, whether that's something I had the right to do." He was quiet. "That's different from what I asked," he said. "I know. You're asking whether you're being fair to me. I'm asking whether you want to be here." "Yes," she said immediately. "Ryan, yes, without question." "Then why haven't you said that?" Not tonight. Why haven't you said it before tonight, when the first article came out, when Garrett called? You've been careful. You've been very careful with me, which I appreciate, but careful sometimes looks like someone calculating their exit." The silence this time was different, longer, the kind that meant he'd said something true that neither of them had been ready to look at directly. "I don't want to be someone who asks too much of you," she said finally. That's what I've been doing, trying not to ask too much. By pulling back. By leaving room. Claire." He pressed his hand flat on the kitchen table. "The room isn't what I need. What I need." He stopped. Tried again. "I spent 4 years in a very quiet life, very controlled, I knew exactly what every day was going to cost me, and I kept it manageable. And then you sat down at my table, and the whole thing cracked open, and I don't have a manageable life anymore, and I'm not—" His voice was lower now. "I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm saying the thing that would be a problem is if you put that room back. If you started being careful instead of being here." She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different. Not the controlled version. Not the CEO, not the woman in the charcoal suit. Just Claire on the phone in the dark. "I've been alone for a long time," she said. "Not alone, the way you've been alone. I know, those are different. But alone in the way where you stop expecting anyone to actually stay. Where you start preparing for the exit before they've even decided to leave. Because it's easier to manage than to be surprised by." She paused. "I have been doing that. To you. Without meaning to." He sat with that. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just stop doing it." "Okay. I'm not going anywhere, Claire." "I know." "Do you? Because you've been acting like—" "I know," she said again more firmly. "I know. Just old habits." She exhaled. "You scare me, Ryan. That's the honest answer. Not you specifically. What this is. I know how to run a company. I know how to close a deal and manage a board and build something from nothing. I don't know how to—" She seemed to be looking for the word. "I don't know how to let something be mine without waiting for the part where it isn't." He understood that completely. The specific fear of people who had learned to hold things loosely because holding them tight had at some point resulted in loss. "Yeah," he said. "I know that feeling." "I imagine you do." They were quiet together for a moment. The comfortable kind, the kind that had a lot of information in it. "I'm not the article," he said finally. "I know. And you're not what Garrett Boyle thinks you are. I know that too. Then let's stop letting those things take up space in this conversation." She made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, more like relief, finding the shape of a laugh. "You're better at this than I am. I had a very tough 8-year-old teacher." This time it was a real laugh, small and real. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah. I'm not going anywhere either." "I know," he said. "I know." He nearly broke that promise to himself 11 days later. Not to her, he didn't say anything to her. That was almost the problem. He kept it completely inside, which was the version of breaking that was hardest to see from the outside, and did the most damage from within. It started at the company Christmas party. Not Claire's company, his. The distribution center annual holiday gathering held in the break room with a catered tray situation and a white elephant gift exchange that Ryan had been successfully avoiding for 4 years by volunteering to organize it, which meant he was busy enough not to participate. This year, Marcus had organized it, which left Ryan without cover. I was standing near the drink table when he overheard 2 of the newer guys from the loading dock, neither of whom knew him particularly well, talking in the specific murmur of people who believed they were out of earshot. Carter. "Yeah, I saw that. The CEO woman. Wild right. I mean, good for him, I guess. She's out of his league by like 1,000 miles. Probably feels bad for him. You know how some women are." "The charity thing. Yeah, I saw that article." Ryan stood very still. "I don't know, man. Guy's a single dad, regular job. What's she even getting out of it?" He put down his drink. He walked out of the break room. He stood in the hallway for a moment, then went to his desk, got his jacket, and left the party 20 minutes early. He drove home. He picked up Emma from the neighbor's Mrs. Kowalski, 72, who watched Emma sometimes in emergencies and always sent her home with cookies. And he was quiet on the drive back, and Emma let him be quiet, which meant she was reading him again, which meant he was bad at hiding it. He put Emma to bed. He sat in the kitchen. He thought about what the 2 guys on the loading dock had said, and he thought about the article, and he thought about Garrett Boyle, and he thought about the photo unidentified companion, and he thought about a room at the Meridian Hotel that had not quite been his, no matter how well he stood in it. And he thought maybe they're right. Not about the charity. He didn't believe the charity, but about the distance, about the 1,000 miles, about what he brought to a table that already had everything on it. He was 35 years old. He coordinated distribution logistics. He drove a 12-year-old company car. He bought Emma's school clothes during the August sale at Target. He borrowed suits. He borrowed jackets. His apartment had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and a kitchen where everything worked but nothing matched. What did he bring? He sat with that question in the kitchen. Silence, and let it do its damage, the way he hadn't let himself since the night Claire had sat down across from him, and something had cracked open. He let the question run until it had run out, until it was just a sound in his head, without any information in it. And then, at the end of it, something else came up. I thought about the diner, about Claire saying everyone in that restaurant was performing, about the spreadsheet at 7 a.m. and the anglerfish article, and the photo of her father's bad crust pie, and the note in black marker for the young lady with the dinosaur opinions. About a phone call where she'd said, "I have been alone," in the way where you stop expecting anyone to actually stay, and how that sentence had come out of a woman who could have had anyone who had built an empire from nothing, who walked into rooms that made other people feel small and never seemed to notice the ceiling. I thought about what Emma had said. Who cares what those people say? He thought about the specific sound of Claire's real laugh. The surprised one. The one she made when he caught her off guard, and she hadn't had time to put the professional version on. I thought she's not with you because she feels sorry for you. She's with you because you make her laugh like that. Because you sat in a restaurant for an hour and a half and didn't make it someone else's problem. Because you raised a daughter who reads The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs 3 times and argues Cretaceous fauna with the focus of a doctoral candidate. Because you are, as it turns out, someone who shows up. Showing up was not nothing. He knew that better than anyone. He picked up his phone. He didn't call Claire. It was past midnight, and she had an early morning, and he wasn't going to do the thing where he called her every time he needed to be reminded of something he should have been able to remind himself of. Instead, he opened his messages, and he typed to her, "I had a bad night. I'm okay. Tell you tomorrow." 3 minutes later, because apparently she was awake, "I'm awake. You can call. Go to sleep." Ryan, seriously. I'm fine. I just needed to. I'm fine now. A pause. Then what happened? He thought about how to say it. I let some people tell me a story about myself, he typed. I believed it for about an hour. Then I stopped. What story? The one where I don't belong. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice, like she was writing something and then reconsidering. Then you belong. Full stop. Go to sleep. He smiled at his phone. In his empty kitchen at midnight, he smiled. Good night, Claire. Good night, Ryan. I mean it, you belong. He set the phone down. He sat in the kitchen for another minute. He thought about the word belong, what it meant, how you earned it, whether earning was even the right frame, whether belonging was something you built or something you found, or whether it was in the end simply something you decided. He decided. He turned off the kitchen light. Christmas was Ryan and Emma's. It always had been. Karen came for a few hours in the morning, and friends dropped by, but the actual day, the core of it, had always been the 2 of them. Their specific rituals. Emma's stocking hung on the back of the bedroom door because they didn't have a fireplace. Pancakes for breakfast, always Emma's choice since she was 5. The Charlie Brown Christmas special in the afternoon, because Sarah had loved it, and Emma had absorbed that love without being told to. The drive around the neighborhood in the evening to look at lights. This year, 2 days before Christmas. Claire had asked, "Can I bring something on Christmas morning?" "You don't have to. I can come later, or not at all, if it's your time." "Come for pancakes," Ryan said. "Are you sure?" He thought about what Emma had said in the car on Thanksgiving. "Is Claire not family? Come for pancakes," he said again. She brought real maple syrup from a farm in Vermont her father had recommended, which Emma immediately declared the greatest contribution to Christmas breakfast in recorded history. And she sat at Ryan's kitchen table in jeans and a sweater with her hair down and made pancakes with Emma, while Ryan stood at the counter drinking coffee and watching his daughter teach this woman who had negotiated a $100 million acquisition and managed 400 employees and been on the cover of business magazines how to properly flip a pancake. And Claire failed at it twice, and got it on the 3rd try, and Emma cheered with complete sincerity. It was the most normal thing in the world. That was what struck him watching the 2 of them at his stove flower on Emma's sleeve. Maple syrup already somehow on the counter. It was completely stubbornly, overwhelmingly normal. Not despite everything. Not in spite of the distance between their worlds, or the articles, or Garrett Boyle, or the loading dock guys, or the photo that had called him unidentified companion. Just normal. Just breakfast. Just his daughter and this woman, and a kitchen full of the smell of pancakes and bad flip attempts and real maple syrup from Vermont. Later, after Karen had come and gone, and Emma had fallen asleep on the couch with her new book open on her chest, and the Charlie Brown special playing at low volume, Ryan and Claire sat in the kitchen with coffee and the specific quiet of a day that had done everything it was supposed to do. "Thank you," Claire said. "For what?" "For letting me be here." He looked at her across the table. She was holding her coffee mug with both hands the way she always did, and she looked... He thought about the word and found it. She looked at home. Not in the way of someone performing comfort. In the way of someone who had found a specific place where the armor wasn't necessary and had set it down. "Thank you for coming," he said. She smiled, the real one. "Ryan." "Yeah, I want to talk about something. Not tonight, tonight is tonight, but soon." He studied her face. It wasn't worried. It was decided. "Okay," he said. "It's not bad," she said. I have something I've been thinking about and I want to say it out loud when it's the right time." "Okay." "Soon," she said. "Okay." Emma stirred on the couch. One hand came up, pulled the book closer, and then she was still again. Ryan looked at his daughter. He looked at Claire. "I thought about a night in November, at a corner table in a restaurant built for two and a glass of water in front of an empty chair, and a woman he'd never met pulling out that chair and sitting down like she had somewhere to be and had decided it was there." He thought about all the wrong turns that had led to the right one. "Soon," he said, and Claire nodded and held her coffee, and they sat in the Christmas quiet of his kitchen while his daughter slept, and the snow that had been threatening all day finally came down outside the window, soft and steady, covering everything. Part 5. The conversation Claire had promised happened on a Saturday in January. Not a dramatic Saturday. Not a planned occasion Saturday. A regular one. Ryan had taken Emma to her swim lesson in the morning. They'd stopped at the grocery store after, and when they got home, Claire was already there sitting on the front steps of the building in a coat he hadn't seen before, holding 2 cups of coffee from the place on the corner. Emma spotted her from the car and was out the door before Ryan had fully parked. "You're early," Emma announced. "The coffee was getting cold," Claire said, and handed Emma the hot chocolate she'd been holding in her other hand, because of course she'd gotten Emma a hot chocolate, and Emma took it with the easy familiarity of someone who had stopped tracking the specific reasons she trusted a person and had simply arrived at the fact of it. Ryan carried the groceries. Claire carried her coffee. Emma carried her swim bag and her hot chocolate, and narrated the entire swim lesson with the detail of a documentary filmmaker, and they went upstairs together and put the groceries away, and it was all completely ordinary, and it was the most important ordinary Ryan had ever been inside of. After lunch, after Emma disappeared into her room with a book and the focused introversion of a child who had been social all morning and now required recovery time, Claire and Ryan sat at the kitchen table with the second round of coffee and the particular quiet of 2 people who had been carrying the same unspoken thing to the same place and had finally arrived. "I want to tell you something," Claire said. "Okay." She turned her coffee mug in both hands. Once. The way she did when she was finding the precise entry point to something she'd thought about carefully. "I've been offered a position," she said. Not offered, approached. "There's a firm in London. They've been building something I've watched for 3 years, and it's the kind of thing I would have said yes to without thinking 5 years ago. The kind of opportunity that only comes in a specific window." Ryan was very still. "They want me to lead a new division," she said. 18 months, possibly longer, based there. The Kensington Group would stay. Jerome could run operations, I'd retain ownership, but I'd be gone, largely. He looked at her. "When did they approach you?" 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago was before Christmas. Before the pancakes and the Vermont maple syrup and Emma teaching her to flip. Before the kitchen quiet and the snow coming down and Claire saying soon. "You've been sitting with it for 6 weeks," he said. "Yes." And you didn't tell me. I needed to know what I was going to say before I told you, because I knew that telling you would. I didn't want to tell you, and then have you feel like you needed to factor yourself out, like you needed to give me permission. She looked at him steadily. I know how you think, Ryan. I know you would have said go, without asking what you actually wanted. He sat with that, because she was right. That was exactly what he would have done. What are you going to say? He asked. She looked at him. I said no. The kitchen was very quiet. Claire, 3 weeks ago, I said no. She held his gaze. I'm telling you now because I should have told you then when it was still a decision, so you could have been part of it. And I'm sorry that I didn't. But I need you to understand that the decision wasn't about giving something up. It was about knowing what I was choosing toward. She paused. I am choosing this. You, Emma, the Mercer Street diner, and the terrible coffee, and the ongoing Cretaceous debate, and your daughter's face when she flipped that pancake right. I am choosing this on purpose, with full information, and I need you to stop waiting for me to change my mind. Ryan looked at this woman across his kitchen table. He thought about the night at Callahan's. The borrowed jacket, Emma's tie, the empty chair and the untouched water, and the hollow weight of sitting alone in a room full of people and feeling like the most forgettable person in it. He thought about how close he'd come to leaving before she sat down. You turned down London, he said. I turned down London. That's Claire, that's a significant. I know what it is. She said it without drama. Just fact. I know exactly what it is. I also know that I spent 12 years building something that I thought would make me feel like I'd arrived somewhere. And I did arrive. I got there. I have the company, and the board, and the acquisition, and the magazine covers, and the Garrett Boyles of the world, telling me what to do with my open heart. She shook her head. And I am sitting at a kitchen table in a 2-bedroom apartment on a Saturday afternoon, drinking grocery store coffee, and this is the most like myself I have felt in years, so I understood that completely. The specific calculus of people who had learned to make decisions alone because making them with someone meant admitting that someone had become necessary. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She looked up. I would not have said go, he said. I would have wanted to, because that's who I've been, the person who makes himself smaller, so the other person doesn't have to feel the weight of staying. But I would not have said go, because I am done making myself smaller. Her eyes did something. He'd gotten better at reading her face over the months, the precise geography of it, the way emotion moved through her features like weather she'd learned to control but couldn't always prevent. This was the uncontrolled version. Okay, she said. Okay. Yeah. She turned her hand over under his. Okay. From down the hallway, Emma's voice. Dad, do we have more of that maple syrup? He didn't look away from Claire. In the cabinet above the stove. Can I have some? On what? A pause. I'll figure something out. That's a no, Em. But, Emma. A long-suffering sigh clearly audible through the bedroom door. Then silence. Then after a moment, the sound of Emma finding a book to be dramatic into instead. Claire's mouth curved. Ryan's did too. And something in the room, some last held tight thing, let go. February brought cold that had opinions about itself, and with it, a shift in the texture of things that Ryan would not have been able to name exactly, but could feel in the way you felt. A season changing, not in one day, but gradually in the accumulated weight of many ordinary ones. Claire rearranged her schedule. Not dramatically, she was still who she was, still ran the company, still had board meetings and investor calls, and Jerome stopping by her office with problems that needed her specific brand of clear-eyed decision-making. But she stopped letting work be the thing that filled every space where something personal might otherwise go. She kept Saturdays. She answered texts from Emma about anglerfish at 7 in the morning without logging into her email first. She came to Ryan's apartment on Tuesday evenings sometimes for no particular reason, and ate whatever was in the refrigerator and sat at the kitchen table while Emma showed her drawings, or argued dinosaur facts, or read passages from books she considered essential. Ryan watched this happen, the way you watched something grow, not all at once, but in the daily increments that only became visible when you looked back and realized how far you'd come from the starting point. Emma, for her part, absorbed Claire into the architecture of her life with the pragmatic grace of a child who had decided something was true and had no further interest in debating it. She set a place for Claire at the table without being asked when Claire was coming for dinner. She texted Claire Ryan had allowed this, which had been Emma's project for approximately 3 weeks, with research findings that she felt were too urgent to wait for an in-person meeting. She had begun referring to Claire's father, whom she had not yet met, as Professor George, which was information Claire had apparently not told her father, who found out when Claire mentioned it on a phone call, and reportedly laughed for a full minute. "She calls me Professor George," Claire told Ryan on the phone that night. "Is that a problem?" "He loves it. He's already planning what to show her when she visits." A pause. He said, and I'm quoting, "Bring the girl with the dinosaur opinions, and also bring Ryan because he sounds like someone I'd like to talk to." Ryan was quiet for a moment. He said that. "When are we going?" "March if you can manage it. Spring break." "Claire, that's—" He stopped, started again. "Emma's going to combust." "I know. That's the intended outcome." She paused. "Ryan, is that okay?" The we in that sentence. The going. He thought about it for exactly no time at all. "Yeah," he said. "The we is okay." The thing with Garrett Boyle resolved itself in a way Ryan hadn't expected, which was that it resolved itself in public and entirely through Claire. It was a board meeting in late February. Ryan wasn't there, obviously, but Claire told him about it that evening, sitting at his kitchen table with her laptop still open beside her, and the specific expression she wore when something had happened that she was still processing. The board had raised the question of the expansion timeline. Garrett had raised the question of leadership stability. And stability in Garrett's framing had a specific subtext that everyone in the room understood and nobody named directly. Claire had let him finish. She'd waited the full precise beat of someone who had decided exactly how much space to give an argument before dismantling it. "I told him," she said, "that I've made exactly one decision in the last 3 years that has made me better at my job. One thing that has clarified what I'm building and why and for whom. And it has nothing to do with the Hargrove acquisition, or the London offer, or any of the metrics that Garrett thinks constitute a life well managed." She looked at Ryan. "And then I told him that the board was welcome to evaluate my leadership on the basis of results as it always had been, and that my personal life was not a line item." What did he say? "He said the board appreciated my commitment." She said it flatly. Which means he lost the room and knew it. Ryan studied her face. "Are you okay?" "I've been better than okay since about 3 months ago." She closed her laptop. "I should have said it sooner. All of it. I kept calibrating what was appropriate, what would land right, how to protect the company's position, while also I was managing everything at once. And I do that, I'm good at that, but I let it go on longer than it needed to because I was afraid of the room." She looked at him. "I'm not afraid of the room." "I know," he said. "Garrett will be fine. He'll realign when the next quarter comes in." "And if he doesn't?" She shrugged, and it was the most complete shrug he'd ever seen, total genuine done. "Then he doesn't. I didn't build this company to spend the rest of my life managing Garrett Boyle's feelings about it." Ryan looked at her across the table. He thought about the woman who had walked into Callahan's Steakhouse on a November night and sat at his table and said, "Can I be your second chance tonight?" with the confidence of someone who had made a decision and was executing it. And then he thought about this woman. Same person. The same directness, the same bone-deep certainty, when she'd chosen something, and he thought that what he was watching across his kitchen table was someone who had found their way back to themselves after a very long time of being excellent and very lonely. He knew what that felt like. "Claire," he said. "Yeah. I'm glad you sat down." She looked at him. She knew what he meant. Not tonight, not at this table. That first night. That corner table. That empty chair. "Me too," she said. March came, and with it the trip to Connecticut. Claire's father lived in a house that had clearly once been very organized and was now beautifully completely ruled by books. They were everywhere, stacked on tables, shelved floor to ceiling in 3 rooms, piled on the kitchen counter, in a system that had an internal logic. Ryan couldn't immediately decode, but that Professor George could apparently navigate without looking. He was 78 shorter than Ryan had imagined, with the same directness in his face that Claire had, and the same quality of stillness, the kind that came from spending decades paying close attention to things. He opened the door before they knocked. Emma had been vibrating with contained energy for the last 20 minutes of the drive, and when Professor George opened the door and looked down at her, she went completely uncharacteristically still. "You must be Emma," he said. "You have a lot of books," Emma said. "I do. Would you like to see the ones about dinosaurs?" Emma looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at Emma. The communication between them lasted approximately 1 second. "Yes, please," Emma said, and Professor George stepped back to let her in, and Emma walked into that house like she was walking into something she'd been heading toward for a long time without knowing it. Ryan shook his hand at the door. Professor George held the handshake a beat longer than necessary, not testing, just taking his time, and looked at Ryan with eyes that were Claire's eyes in an older face. "She talks about you," the professor said. "Good things, I hope. Honest things," he said, which with Claire is the same. They went in. The day had the quality of something that had been imagined and then turned out to be better than the imagining. Professor George and Emma disappeared into the study for 2 hours on the stated premise of looking at books about dinosaurs, and emerged only when Claire called them for lunch. Emma carrying 3 volumes she'd been given to borrow and talking at a pace that suggested she'd been storing sentences for days and was only now finding an appropriate recipient for all of them. Over lunch, soup bread, the professor's own recipe, which was extraordinary in the specific way that old recipes made with long practice were extraordinary. Ryan and Professor George talked. Not about anything important at first. The drive up, the winter, Ryan's work. And then gradually the way conversations shifted when both people decided to be genuine, they talked about more. "Claire tells me you lost your wife," the professor said between the soup and the bread. "Yes, sir, 4 years ago. Emma was very young. She was 4. Professor George was quiet for the moment. He looked at Emma across the table, who was explaining to Claire why a particular illustration in one of the borrowed books was scientifically inaccurate and doing so with considerable authority. "She seems like someone who turned out fine," he said. "She's the best thing I've ever done," Ryan said. "That's what Claire said too." He looked at Ryan. Word for word, actually. Ryan held the professor's gaze. "My wife died 11 years ago," the professor said. "Claire was 23. She'd just started the company. She put everything into it, I think, because she needed somewhere to put herself while she was grieving. It worked in the way those things work. She built something extraordinary." He paused. "But she stopped letting people in. Stopped expecting them to stay." He looked down at his soup bowl. "I've worried about that for years, the staying part." Ryan understood completely what was not being said. "She stays," Ryan said. "When she decides something is real, she stays." The professor looked at him. "I know," he said. "I just needed to see who she was staying for." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an evaluation. It was simply a father who had watched his daughter build walls for 11 years, finally meeting the person who had walked through one and taking a moment to confirm what he was looking at. "Sir," Ryan said, "I am not going anywhere." Professor George nodded once, slowly. Then he passed Ryan the bread and said, "Tell me about logistics coordination. I've always been curious how distribution networks actually function." And for the next 40 minutes, they talked about supply chains with the mutual engagement of 2 people who had found an unexpected overlap. And across the table, Claire met Ryan's eyes, and the small quiet thing in her expression was the thing he'd learned was her version of completely undone. On the drive home, Emma slept in the back seat for the first time since she was 5. Fully asleep, the 3 borrowed books in her lap completely leveled by the day. Claire rode in the passenger seat with her feet tucked under her and watched the highway go by. "He likes you," she said after a while. "He's remarkable." He told me when I called him from the kitchen that you were the real thing. His exact words. Ryan kept his eyes on the road. The real thing. He doesn't say that lightly. I know. Claire was quiet for a moment. Ryan. Yeah. I want to ask you something. He glanced at her. Her face was turned toward him now, and it was the unguarded version. No armor, no calibration, just Claire. Ask, he said. What do you want? Not I know what you have. I know who you are. I know what you've built, and what you've survived, and what you're doing with your life. But what do you want, for you? Not for Emma, not because of what happened, not because of what you think you're supposed to want. For yourself. What does Ryan Carter actually want? He drove for a moment in the dark. He thought about the question seriously the way it deserved. I want to stop borrowing jackets, he said. She made a sound that was the beginning of a laugh, and he kept going. I want Emma to grow up knowing that the world is bigger than the one I can show her by myself. I want Sunday mornings at Mercer Street and bad coffee and your father's books, and... He stopped. I want to wake up and not spend the first 30 seconds of the day counting what I can afford to feel. I want... His voice was quieter now. I want what's already in this car. The highway hummed. Claire didn't say anything for a moment. Then she reached over and put her hand over his on the gear shift, and she left it there. And he drove, and Emma slept in the back seat with her dinosaur books, and the dark came down all around them, and none of it needed to be said again. April arrived, and with it, the thing Ryan had been trying not to name for months. Not because he was afraid of it, because he respected it. Because some things deserved to be approached carefully, not out of fear, but out of understanding that they were larger than ordinary moments and shouldn't be rushed into like they were ordinary. He'd known for a while. He'd known if he was being completely honest with himself since a Tuesday evening in February when Claire had come over for no reason and ended up at the kitchen table helping Emma with a school project about ecosystems. And at some point, Emma had leaned her head on Claire's shoulder, the way she leaned on Ryan's when she was tired without thinking about it. Just going there, and Claire had not moved or adjusted or made it into something she just kept talking about ecosystems. One hand coming up absently to rest on the back of Emma's head, and Ryan had stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the two of them under the lamplight and thought, this is it. This is the thing. He planned it the way he planned things carefully, but not rigidly. He talked to Karen first, which Karen was going to hold over him for the rest of their lives, and he'd made his peace with that. He talked to Professor George on the phone, which was a shorter conversation than he expected, because the professor said approximately 45 seconds in, Ryan, I've been waiting for this call. Do what you need to do, and that was that. He talked to Emma last, or not talked showed. He sat down across from her at the kitchen table on a Thursday evening with a small box he'd kept in the inside pocket of his work bag for 2 weeks, and he set it on the table between them, and Emma looked at it, and looked at him, and her left foot started the pendulum swing. Is that what I think it is? She said. Probably. She looked at the box. She looked at him. The swing of her foot slowed. Are you scared? She asked. A little. That's okay, she said. Karen says. I know what Karen says. Emma smiled. Then she got serious again, in the way she got serious when she'd been thinking about something for a while. Daddy, can I tell you something? Always. I think Mom would have liked her, she said. I don't remember everything about Mom, but I remember she used to say that the best people were the ones who made you feel like yourself. She looked at the box. Claire makes you feel like yourself. Ryan looked at his daughter for a long moment. I thought about 4 years of careful, controlled, managed days. He thought about a Tuesday in October and the specific silence of an apartment that had changed overnight. He thought about school pickups and grocery lists and the August sale at Target and 50-hour weeks and the particular kind of exhaustion that lived below tiredness. He thought about a borrowed jacket and a navy blue tie with tiny gold diamonds and a corner table in a restaurant that was too nice for what it became. I thought about all of it. And he thought about this 8-year-old girl across the table who had survived the unsurvivable thing and come out the other side with more grace and more wisdom than most people accumulated in a lifetime, and who had just told him that her mother would have approved. "Yeah," he said. "She does." Emma slid the box across the table back to him. "Then go." He picked it up. Hy took her to Mercer Street Diner. Not because it was grand, because it was theirs. Because it was where Peach Pie beat Apple and Johnny Cash played on repeat, and the coffee was just barely acceptable, and nobody cared about board meetings or acquisition deals, or business magazine covers. Because it was the place where they had first talked like two people who weren't performing anything. Claire knew something was happening. She was too perceptive not to, but she didn't say anything. She sat across from him in their usual booth, feet tucked under her, the way she always sat in casual places, and she looked at him with the expression she'd developed over months of learning his face. Patient, present, amused. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "Where you know what you want to say, but you're finding the exact right order for the words." "I don't do that." "You absolutely do that. Emma told me." He laughed despite himself. The coffee came. The waitress, gray-streaked hair, same one as always, who at this point recognized them and had stopped pretending she wasn't aware they were regulars, set it down and didn't linger. Johnny Cash was playing, low and steady. "I keep a close watch on this heart of mine." Ryan wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay. 4 months ago, I was sitting at a table in a restaurant in a borrowed jacket, and I was about to leave. I had my jacket half off. I was done, not just with the night, with the whole idea. The idea that I was someone who got to have this. Someone who got to walk into a room and sit across from a person and let myself matter to them." He looked at her. "And then you sat down." Claire was very still. "I have been afraid since then," he said. "Not of you. Of what happens if I let myself have it and it goes away. That fear it's old. It's been there since October 4 years ago, and I don't think it's going to leave completely. But it's been getting quieter. Every week it's been getting quieter. Because you stay, Claire. Even when I gave you every reason to calculate your exit, you stayed. Even when it would have been easier to step back, you stayed. And I need you to know that I see that. That I know what it costs a person to stay when they've learned that staying leads to loss. I know that because I know it myself." Her eyes were very bright. "I am not the man I was in that restaurant," he said. I still coordinate distribution logistics and drive a 12-year-old company car and shop the August sale at Target. I'm still that man. But I am not the man who was about to leave. I am not the man who believes he doesn't belong. And that is..." His voice was steady. He was going to stay steady. "That is because of you. And Emma. And Mercer Street Diner. And bad coffee. And the Cretaceous period. And Professor George's terrible pie crust. And every Tuesday evening, you've come over for no reason. You rebuilt something in me. And I don't say that to give you the weight of it. I say it because you deserve to know what you did." He reached into his jacket pocket. He set the small box on the table between them. Claire looked at it. She looked at him. The Johnny Cash record turned slowly. The coffee cooled. The diner carried on around them. Counter stools. The same yellow light. The same smell of coffee and pie. And the very specific warmth of a place that had been feeding people through their worst and best moments since 1962. "I am not the same person I was in that restaurant," he said. "But I want to keep becoming whoever comes next. And I want to do that with you." He opened the box. Simple ring, plain setting, chosen because it was exactly right and not because it was expensive. "Claire Kensington, I am asking you to stay. Not because I can't do this without you. I know how to do this without you. I've been doing it for 4 years. I am asking because the version of this life that has you in it is the one I choose. Every day on purpose I choose it." She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She pressed her lips together for a second, which he had learned was the thing she did when she was feeling something large and was deciding whether to let it have the full space it wanted. She let it have the space. "You practiced that," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. "For 2 weeks. It was perfect. I had good source material." She laughed, the real one, the surprised one, the one he'd been working toward since the first time he heard it across a restaurant table in November. And then she stopped laughing, and she looked at him with a directness that went all the way through him. No reservation, no calibration, just completely there. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." He put the ring on her finger. She looked at it on her hand for a moment, not performing, looking the way she looked at things she was committing to memory. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah. I sat down at your table because something in me said go. I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was walking into." She turned her hand looking at the ring. "Now I know. I walked into this, and I would do it again every single time." He picked up his coffee. She picked up hers. They sat in the Mercer Street diner on a Thursday night in April, with Johnny Cash playing, and the coffee just barely acceptable, and the pie somewhere in the back extraordinary. And Ryan Carter, 35 years old logistics coordinator father man, who had once been so close to leaving that he'd had his jacket half off, sat across from the woman who had refused to let him go. The next morning, Emma came to the kitchen in her pajamas with the stars on them, and she looked at Claire's hand, and she looked at her father, and her left foot went very still. "Deal," she said. Ryan looked at his daughter. "Deal, deal," he said. Emma held out her hand. He shook it. And then Emma turned to Claire and held her hand out, too small and serious and completely open, and Claire took it and shook it with the gravity the moment required, and Emma nodded once and went to get her cereal, and the morning came in through the windows the way mornings did, immediate, ordinary, and full of everything that mattered, because in the end, that was where the real story lived, not in the borrowed jacket, or the empty chair, or the article that called him unidentified. Not in the board meetings, or the acquisitions, or the rooms that didn't quite belong to him. Not in the grief, though the grief had been real. Not in the fear, though the fear had been real too. The story lived here at a kitchen table on an ordinary morning in a city going about its business outside the window, with a man who had almost stopped believing he deserved to be chosen, a woman who had almost stopped believing anyone would stay, and a girl who had known from the beginning, with the absolute clarity of someone who had lost enough to understand what was worth holding, that this was exactly how it was supposed to go. Ryan Carter had sat alone at a table built for two, and someone had chosen to sit across from him, and that had turned out to be everything.